welcome again to the Insurance Leadership Forum 2021. This event is brought to you by Persatuan Insurance Malaysia, in short PIAM, in collaboration with the Malaysian Insurance Institute MII, and supported by Life Insurance Association of Malaysia and Malaysian Takaful Association. This forum actually started out in 2014 as the HR forum, but has evolved over time in the past 6 years to something larger. Today, we gather here to address the burning issues of the insurance industry, leadership. I am Lillian. I'm a brand therapist and a mindfulness coach, and I will be your MC today. It is really apt that the theme of this forum is reset, renewal, hope, and opportunity. Coming out of 2020 in these challenging times during the pandemic that we're currently going through is one of the most difficult times to lead. I'm sure you'll agree, especially as the workplace changes, the economy struggles, and employees live in fear and uncertainty of their jobs. People are challenged to remain motivated. This is why we created this forum, to address and to create productive conversations around these issues faced by you, the leaders. But I know that there's one thing that the world's greatest leaders all have in common. As leaders, we bring hope in face of despair. Hope is the orientation toward the future. Hope is seeing the future, a future we can attain if we keep moving forward and as needed, adjusting and adapting. A leader's hopeful outlook enables your own people to see beyond today's challenges to tomorrow's answers. Hope is real, genuine feeling of possibility. After a long year in 2020, it is now time to reset and renew. And here's how industry leaders are going to move into the future with hope and opportunity. Digital transformations, and optimizing new workplace models to attract and retain a world-class workforce. Basically, the future of all things tech and talent will dominate the CEO agenda throughout 2021 and beyond, all of which we will be covering in the two-day forum. So let me just break down for you today the agenda. We will have a conversation around adaptive leadership, a discussion on employee well-being, and a fireside chat on sustaining peak performance as a leader beyond any crisis. And you will want to come back tomorrow because we are talking about how to maneuver the online space using your leadership brand. We will also be having an essential conversation on reskilling the workforce for sustainability and innovation of the business. We will look at what the virtual future might look like for the insurance industry as a whole. And finally, we will have a great conversation with you on how you as a leader can lead transformation in your own organizations. So prior to this forum, we have also polled and gathered the most requested topic matters to create this forum in the insurance industry. So I would like to encourage you to put in any questions you have into the Q&A box at the bottom of your window, if you have any, as we go along the entire day's flow. So please feel free to use the chat to just share your thoughts and your insights as well. So to kick off this event, I would like to invite Mr. Zainudin Ishak, convener of the PIAM's Education HRD Committee to deliver the welcome address for today. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Zainudin Ishak.
Thank you, Lillian, for the lively introduction, and definitely will set the right tone for our 2 days forum starting from today. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Encik Adnan Zaylani bin Muhammad Zahid, Assistant Governor, Bank Negara Malaysia. Mr. Anthony Lee, Chairman of PIAM. Mr. Samuel Kim, Founding President, Center for Asia Leadership Initiative. Mr. John Low, CEO, Thoughtful. Ms. Darshini Nathan, Head and Berhad. Mr. Jonathan Chong, Chief Risk Officer, M General Insurance Berhad. Ms. Wong Woon Man, Group Head Human Resource, Allianz Malaysia Berhad. Ms. Kavita Satwa Leka, Founder, Innocence Leadership Coach Outer. Ms. Gail Gibson, Leadership Coach Author, Ms. Julie Chong, CEO of PIAM. Assalamualaikum, selamat datang, and a very good morning to all. On behalf of Persatuan Insurans Am Malaysia, PIAM, I would like to extend to all of you a warm welcome to the Industry Leadership Forum 2021, theme Reset, Renewal, Hope, and Opportunity. Admittedly, incidents of COVID-19 taking place in the last 2 years were barely imaginable, such as having the entire team of your staff working from home and spending considerable time and working hours on video conferencing instead of interacting physically with contact across the world. The pandemic has and is still testing our resolve and resilience. Nevertheless, it is an exciting time for Education and Human Resource Development EHRD Committee of Persatuan Insurans Am Malaysia PIAM to organize the forum, which is in its 6 years since 2014. PIAM have lined up a very distinguished speakers sharing their unique insight on how the industry leaders have met opportunity out of the disruption and proactively seizing the moment by converting them into economic and social value. Ladies and gentlemen, reset, renewal, hope, and opportunity. Despite the devastation of the global pandemic that entering the second year, industry leaders have viewed 2021 with lens of hope and opportunity. We have seen companies taking bold steps to reset the dial with a bold plan for growth, innovation, digital transformation, and workforce and talent transformation. The ability to successfully manage and navigate through changes and transformation is among the most important skills needed for personal happiness and prosperity of the organization. Deep appreciation on the connection between technology and talent as opportunity to transform our organization may only be achievable with elevating the workforce skill set, diversifying their exposure as well as improving their agility and engagement. Many business leaders have realized that they can't simply hire the workforce they need. There aren't enough prospective recruits with the right skill set, and the expense would be enormous for external top talent. Instead, companies have learned to prioritize upskilling their existing employees or members of their communities. This means expanding people capabilities and employabilities through effective training tool platform to fulfill talent needs for rapidly changing economy. Workforce and talent transformations, developing knowledgeable, strategically adept, cognitively flexible, emotionally intelligent, and proficient workforce. We need talent who can command artificial intelligence, analyze data, invent and apply solutions on the fly, and slide effortlessly into a new role as needed. At the same time, they must ensure that they are well updated on the advancement of technology and participate in online courses to keep improving and growing their skill set. When work heat up, ideas should flow from all corners of the companies, whether from full-time managers or to newly joined executives and trainees. In addition, as organizations embrace digitalization, leaders and talent need to adopt a new mindset that focuses on empathy and functionality. Organizations need to grow and build talent within their capabilities toward this path to ensure that the business remains relevant, in sync, and in contact with the customer and also the consumer. This will in turn safeguard the sustainability of the trade and the industry. Ladies and gentlemen, today our speakers will share insight on reset, renewal, hope, and opportunity for us to explore how talent can drive change and transform. They are the fuel. Therein lie the challenges in attracting, recruiting, retaining, developing, growing, and engaging talent. I would like to thank our guest of honor, Encik Adnan Zaylani, our distinguished speakers, moderators, and panelists for taking the time from their busy schedule to share their expertise and knowledge with us. I would like also to wish and extend my appreciation to the organizing committee led by MII CEO, Ms. Shalini Pavitran, for excellent arrangement in making this event possible. I was informed that they've been working very hard in planning and executing this event. Lastly, thank you to all the members company and for all the participants today for your support in making this event a success. Your continuous support is highly appreciated. Have a fruitful and rewarding time in the forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zainudin, for laying down the foundation of this event for us. We appreciate you. Next, to inspire us, we have our guest of honor, a person who has vast experience and knowledge in the development of the financial and insurance markets of our country, Malaysia. With over 20 years of leadership experience under his belt, there could not have been a more appropriate person than him to embellish, to enhance, to enlighten, and to enrich this forum. I am absolutely delighted to present the Assistant Governor of Bank Negara Malaysia, Mr. Adnan Zaylani bin Muhammad Zahid, to deliver the keynote address of this forum. The floor is yours, Mr. Adnan.
Thank you. You're very kind. Yeah. Encik Zainudin, also thank you. Encik Zainudin, the convener of PIAM Education. Mr. Loh Guat Lan, the Liam President, Mr. Anthony Lee, PIAM President, CEOs and members of the industry, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum and good morning. Thank you again for it is my pleasure to be here at the Insurance Industry Leadership e-forum for 2021. I would like to thank PIAM for inviting me to deliver the keynote address for this two-day forum. We meet in quite challenging and worrying times. This pandemic appears to be far from over. Despite the lockdowns, despite our now accelerated vaccination, we have yet to see the cases, number of cases come down, but there's hope yet. So the authorities, they tell us that most cases are asymptomatic and mild, and vaccination really helps prevent serious cases. For now, going by the experience of other countries, this could be the best that we can hope for. If this is so, then certainly we have to adjust our thinking and outlook. And we may have to discard notions of returning to pre-COVID normalcy. Life will certainly be different. So the theme, reset, renewal, hope and opportunity, is certainly a recognition of this. And I'm sure this forum will bring forth many lessons and ideas in adjusting to the new environment. Nonetheless, the industry itself has fared relatively well for 2020. Profitability was higher in the second half of 2020, albeit driven by investment performance. In the life and family takaful sector, underwriting profits have generally been sustained despite slower growth in new business premiums. For the general sector, lower motor claims following the movement control orders led to better underwriting results and higher operating profits. Undoubtedly, this is in contrast to quite a number of economic sectors that have been far more challenged. Manufacturing, mining and quarrying, agriculture, construction all registered contraction in 2020. The services sector also registered contraction, but the subsectors of finance and insurance managed to sustain positive growth together with the information and communication subsectors. This, of course, reflects the underlying need and sustained demand for the products, a need that will weather through most crises, health and economic included. But from another perspective, and some do ask this question, could these industries do more to help during the crisis? Certainly, the insurance and takaful industry, a sector that has been that in relative terms has been fairly immune, should ask itself this question. And this is a question that will still be there if 2021 doesn't look any different. So far, total premiums and contributions of the sector grew by 11.3% as at end May 2021. If projections by Allianz Research are correct, Malaysian insurance premiums, which are expected to grow by 7.5% per year over the next decade, are set to outpace the economy's growth again in 2021. So as such, to the observer, the Malaysian insurance and takaful industry can play a bigger role towards supporting the economic hardship and recovery. It should be acknowledged that the industry has stepped forward with the relief measures to help affected policyholders and pulling together the COVID test fund. However, these hard times are getting harder, and where more can be done, we should certainly give it some thought. After all, the modern economy is a web of complexity with various interactions and interconnectedness within and across industries and economic actors. Much of value creation in the modern economy comes from this complexity, and losses in some sectors would not only spill over, but perhaps even become amplified to eventually hit our own sector. We can also remind ourselves of the main ideas behind social justice is to bring society together for social and economic cooperation that is necessary to create value for all. A key principle of justice to support this is to ensure the less fortunate are duly assisted. The natural party obligated to do this is the government, but in a moral society, we ought to play our part as well. I thus would urge leaders such as yourselves here to also consider what we can do. Naturally, we could think of donations or charitable acts under corporate social responsibility initiatives. But even within the realm of our business strategies, we can do much with a different mindset and approach. Reshaping our business strategies to incorporate sustainability as a key agenda would already put us on track in doing more for society. Ending poverty, reducing inequality, promoting health and well-being, and more of the 17 sustainability development goals are within the capabilities of the industry to support and even spearhead. Indeed, we are pleased to see the takaful industry advance towards embracing value-based intermediation initiative, which is quite aligned to the sustainability agenda. The VBI aims to generate positive and sustainable impact to the economy, community, and environment while remaining consistent with the shareholders' sustainable returns and long-term interests. The takaful industry has introduced a guiding principle, a guiding framework in June 2021 to support the application of values and practices that are consistent with the objectives of Sharia in takaful and retakaful businesses. However, certainly the universalities of values such as wealth sharing, fair treatment of consumers, and transparency can also be applicable for the industry as a whole. Another one of the universalities that should be similarly applicable is climate action and managing climate risk. The World Economic Forum highlighted that environmental related risks such as extreme weather and climate action failure will top the global risk landscape in terms of likelihood and their impacts over the next decade. Therein lies two crucial roles for the industry in developing effective solutions that firstly enhance disaster preparedness, and secondly, could shape the right behavior to mitigate and reduce climate risk. On our part, the issuance of the climate change and principle-based taxonomy is aimed to promote sustainable risk management practices and guide industry players in managing climate risk. In this regard, the insurance and takaful industry will need to develop institutional capacity for climate risk consideration and integration into the overall business strategies, mandates and structures, risk management framework and practices, cultures and competencies. Regulatory preparedness for mandatory disclosure on climate risk and implementation of climate stress tests also necessitates the industry's compliance agility. Besides sustainability and climate risk, digitalization will continue to be among our foremost agendas. This year, we are working on the digital banking licenses applications, which is now going through the assessment stage. We are also developing a framework to promote new digital players and distribution channels in the domestic insurance and takaful industry. Similar to the banking industry, there could be vast gains to be made on efficiency and inclusion through digitalization. And similar to banking, the interest could be equally high. Even now, we see sustained interest in applications to participate in the financial technology regulatory sandbox, where digital players deploy and test their solutions in a live environment within specified parameters and timeframes. Many of these solutions aim at greater financial inclusion by promoting sustainable, affordable, and innovative solutions and addressing market gaps in the underserved and unserved segments. Some of these segments are already great opportunities. Digitalization has brought about new economic activity, such as the e-commerce market, which is projected to reach $30 billion or almost 130 billion ringgit in gross merchandise value by 2025, from the current level of $11.4 billion in 2020. There is also the emergence of new ancillary demands by businesses arising out of digitalization to manage against cyber and business interruption risks. In sum, I would think that there's much for the industry to look forward to. The eventual recovery, the new environment, new markets, digitalization, and perhaps new players, as well as a renewed emphasis on impact, either through sustainability or value-based intermediation or climate. Nonetheless, let's not forget the ongoing reform work in the tariff liberalization, medical and health inflation, and others. These would continue to be key initiatives that the bank will focus on and work with the industry. These remain important market reforms that would, over the long term, ensure industry and market sustainability while allowing the market to function as the fit-for-purpose mechanism to deliver, in general, the products and services that can best meet customer needs and the needs of the economy. But all these are just our plans. As leaders, we should recognize that plans can only be executed if things turn out roughly as we expected. In our world where now uncertainty runs high, where expecting the unexpected becomes a widely used mantra, I would like to leave you with a quote by Louis Pasteur, the 19th century French microbiologist who aptly happens to also be known as the father of immunology. Chance favors the prepared minds. So with that, I wish you all a highly engaging and productive forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adnan, for that wonderful keynote address. It is true that we should be prepared for the future, isn't it? I'm wondering, I'm just echoing what Mr. Adnan has said, to think about how us as leaders, how can we move forward with sustaining not only what business, like also how to sustain and the environment, what's around us, and how do we create the economy of sustainability as a human race? That's something we should think about. So today we intend to have a very interactive forum. I want to remind you that you can always ask questions and make sure you put it into the Q&A box. Melina has also dropped the program book again. And if you want that, you can grab that and all the speakers and the agenda will be in it. So before I move into the next session, I want to pose you a question. So Melina, can you bring up the poll on a scale of 1 to 5? How adaptive are you as a leader to change? Let's take this poll together. 1 being the least adaptive and 5 being, I'm there. I'm very, very adaptable. So where are you right now? Let us know. Let's take a vote. And team, you can put up the poll and we'll close it in a couple more seconds. Let's see where we are. And when you're ready, team, you can pull up the results. Oh, wow. Most of us are landing at 4. That's highly adaptive. Good job, guys. And this is so apt because our next speaker, I'll introduce him in a bit. Samuel will interpret these results in his session, okay? And So in our current tumultuous world in which organizations and community face tremendous adaptive pressures from both outside and within, the practice of effective leadership, that is to mobilize people to embrace changes or to make adaptations, is ever so critical for one's survival and growth. Our next speaker emphasizes that leadership is just more than inspiration, decisive action, and expanded followership, but rather about taking risks that disturbs the status quo, nudging stakeholders to think and act that ultimately leads to progress. Through Center for Asia Leadership, a group of nonprofit international organization established by our next speaker and his peers as of Harvard scholars, he runs over 70 programs annually in 31 Asian countries, nurturing and empowering over 42,000 established leaders in Asia to overcome immunity to change and addressing maladaptive leadership practices. Based on his past experiences, he have worked with 40 different organizations, and he will share his key observations of the 4 common traits that characterizes the thriving organizations in his talk today, titled Adaptive Leadership, a 4-part framework for your organizations to make sustainable progress. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Samuel Kim, founding president of Center for Asia Leadership. Welcome, Samuel.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. You call it Selamat Pagi and Selamat Datang. I would like to send my warmest regards. I'm actually currently based in Seoul at the moment, but I want to send you everyone a warm regards. I hope that everyone is doing well and keeping safe. I'd like to, first of all, thank the PIAM and the MIAI for giving me this wonderful opportunity to share something that I am very passionate about. Again, thank you so much for this opportunity. And also thank you, Ms. Kao, for that wonderful introduction. I am very much looking forward to having a very great session this morning with you. I am given about 30 minutes or so, but I would like to finish my talk in about 20 minutes and maybe leave about 10 minutes or so for the Q&A. So I will pull up my slide and then I will begin. I hope that everyone is able to look at this slide here. And so the topic for today is going to be adaptive leadership, a 4-part framework for your organization to make a sustainable change. Today's topic is very relevant, and I think that the organizers have done a great job of picking those 4 key words. And in a way, I'd like to relate my talk in addressing these themes. Before I begin, also, I'd like to thank Mr. Adnan for that wonderful, informative, and insightful speech that he had given, as well as Mr. Ishak for the opening. And so thank you very much for that. So let me begin. I am actually originally from Korea, and I have put up here a lot of visuals, a lot of pictures here, but I have kind of put this into a 5-story format because these are the key moments in my life that has significantly impacted the way that I look at the world, especially thinking about what leadership is and what leadership may mean in the modern day context. I was born in Korea. I mean, I won't necessarily go into all the stories here, but in Korea, being the generation who has experienced poverty, but also at the same time overcoming the poverty, and there was a lot of that leadership element in there. Then when I was 10, I moved to the Philippines because my parents were humanitarian workers. The reason I actually put the Philippines here is because Philippines was considered back in the days, in the 70s and 80s, the role model country that Korea wanted to become. It was one of the well-to-do countries back then, but sort of like knowing what happened to the Philippines involving a bad leadership, both in politics, in the commerce, and just overall, has really brought the Philippines to what it is today. This country has tremendous potential, tremendous potential. Every time I meet Filipinos, every time I visit Philippines, I lived in the Philippines for 10 years, and so I think I have the right to say this. But this country has tremendous potential. But again, it boils down to leadership. And so this was something that I was able to really observe. Third was when I was spending my time at the UN. That was actually my first job, and I was working at the United Nations. I was representing South Korea at the time. And I was able to really kind of witness what was going on at this time. You know, the Twin Towers falling down, and there was a lot of chaos and confusion around the world. And by just looking at all these things, you know, I was able to see one pattern, that these chaos and confusion were actually human-created confusions. The wars, the refugees, the climate change, and all these things were really the human-caused problem. But at the same time, it was also the human arrogance and the ignorance that was causing it very difficult to solve these global transnational problems. And then my fourth story is basically my time at Wall Street during the 2008 financial crisis. And this was the company that, was there, 153-year-old company that actually had so many smart talents, top talents from all around the world. But then this company was actually the one that brought the 2008 financial crisis. And sadly, it collapsed. And the fifth story is basically really traveling around the world and meeting with different leaders and being able to hear from them, from their own experience, why leadership is important, or to be more specific, why good leadership is really important. And so what I want to say here this morning is that, a lot of what I'm going to be sharing this morning is going to be based on my own personal experience. And so maybe not everything that I say may be relevant to you, but I hope that you may be able to get something very useful from what I am sharing today. So I have put, my talk into 4 parts, okay? And it is actually comprised into 4 questions. And the very first question I want to raise is, why doesn't good things happen to everyone? We all have an aspiration. We all have a desire to see something good happening in our country, in the world, in our family, in our community. Personally, we really want to see something good happening to us. But the reality is that, the good things does not happen to everyone. And if you say, what are the good things? And probably you might want to consider these, the growth, progress, feeling that there's going to be better tomorrow, feeling hopeful. There's an improving quality of life. There's a better opportunity that awaits. There's happiness. And for those of you who, as children, this is the place where I want to pass on, to our children, the future that I want to pass on. In a way, you're also feeling like that you're contributing to something, that you are part of the community. At the same time, you're feeling proud of your community. And so in a way, I may not have encapsulated everything, but these are some of the things that, that we consider as good things. But the reality is that, these are not happening to everyone. And so we got to be asking this question, why is this not happening to everyone? So I can give you an example of this. I've been to these countries, and I'm not sure if you can, kind of name these countries, but anyone would like to volunteer, be courageous enough to mention any of the names that you see here. Any country. You can just unmute your mic and just speak it out. Anyone. And it's okay if you don't get it right. I mean, this is not a school here, so you can just take the courage to speak and kind of point out which country these are. Anyone?
Samuel, the crowd can't speak up. It's a webinar, so you can look at the chat.
Ah, okay.
I'll read it out.
All
Cambodia,
right.
Myanmar.
Sure.
Venezuela.
Venezuela.
Yes.
And probably Mexico.
Venezuela. Yes, wonderful. You are correct. A lot of you have mentioned it. Thank you very much, everyone. The country, I'm actually going to share you these countries. Myanmar on the top left, and then Philippines, Venezuela, Argentina. I won't, very much go into details, but Myanmar, in the 40s and 30s, and this is actually in the report in the World Economic Forum, that Myanmar was one of the vibrant countries. And in fact, back in the days, this was where a lot of people actually went, a country that a lot of people went for university. And in fact, Myanmar was considered as one of the main source of top talents, in Asia. Philippines used to do very well. In 1968, when the South Korean president went to Philippines, he said that, if we can only become like the Philippines, that we have no other hope. That's really the role model. And in fact, many of the Korean diplomats who were there in the Philippines were sharing these moments that, these bosses that I used to work under, that, the Philippines was really the country that really wanted to go and work in, the infrastructure, the education system, the medical, healthcare, all these were really a top class in the world. Venezuela, we know this. We also know that Venezuela used to be the second high income country in Central and South America. Argentina in the late 1800s used to have an economic size 5 times bigger than France. But you know what happened? A lot of these leadership issues have really brought this country down. All boils down to leadership. I can also mention to you some of these companies. These are some of the typical companies that have either experienced once or twice of bankruptcy. And if you look deeply into it, there's a lot of that leadership issues at play. On the right, these are some of the companies that I used to work with or for. Okay, either used to work for them or work with them as part of my portfolio. Some of these companies, you might know that some of these companies may not exist at the moment. Some of the companies have suffered greatly, despite that they have a lot of potential. So some of these companies, like Samsung, for example, went into bankruptcy due to the Galaxy Note 7 crisis in 2017. So having seen this in and out by working with them for extended period of time, I've been really observing this. And after kind of the 2008 financial crisis, which I have it here, I was able to kind of move on. And I felt that it's really time for me to reflect and really think about what good leadership is and how we can exercise a good leadership that really brings an improvement in our lives and conditions. And just by looking at these these companies, what they had gone through, and some of the companies might be prospering at the moment, but some of the companies might be in what we call the state of mediocrity, or some of the companies are in the state of decline. And there's definitely a reason why they're experiencing either one of these 3 paths. And so we got to be asking this question: why isn't good thing happening to everyone? And our job is really to think about these things. Are we decaying at the moment, or are we in mediocre state, or are we in the growth path? So by asking this question, one of the leadership work is really being cognizant of where we stand today, what we are today, where are we today. It is very important that we take the moment to do that reality check in terms of where are we today. Are we in the decay path, or are we in the mediocrity path, or are we in the growth path? And start thinking about why. So that's one thing that I think the thriving organizations do well, always being aware, being cognizant of where we are today on a daily basis. And this will require humility. This will really require, speaking to one another and really seeing what we see that we got to pay attention to. What are these elements of decay and mediocrity that we got to pay attention to, that we got to remedy? Because our aspiration is really to experience growth, pursue growth. The second question possibly is then we're going to be thinking about this. Then what determines what we are today, or where we are today, or where we stand today? That's really the question. And so the question I want to propose here is that we are experiencing so many things around us and within us. Right now, outside us, the global pandemic. None ever in our history that we have experienced this wide global scale of pandemic. But at the same time, we are having a technological revolution. There's a climate change that Mr. Adnan had mentioned. There's also the political instability. There's a war. There's an economic crisis, and we have many more, right? But then it is very important for us to really see what's happening around us that's impacting us and our industries. We got to really be attentive to what's happening. But at the same time, there are enemies within us as well, right? There are some maladaptive cultures and practices, complacency, arrogance, ignorance, politics, deferral, denial, silos, finger pointing, scapegoating, blaming. All these are really, something that we got to pay attention to. And so what determines what we are going to be good today is really how we respond to these external and internal forces. There are some people who are going to be saying that, you know what, I think we're okay. We're relatively doing well. So we are in good standing. But really, you're going to be asking this question, really? Because there are these forces, trends, and all these cultural elements that we got to be paying attention to, because, you know, all these companies that have done well, and personally having worked with Samsung for quite a long time, I was able to see this, that the moment that they became the first in the world, within 16 months, that's when the Galaxy Note 7 crisis happened. It is really important. Despite that they were saying that we were always doing that reality check, but I don't know why we missed this. So there are a lot of unknowns, there are a lot of blind spots. And so our leadership is going to be really about our response. How are we going to respond to these external and internal forces? And based on my experience, I was able to see that there are 6 responses. One, there are companies that just don't see that there is a problem, or there are challenges, or there things that they need to be attending to. So therefore, they do nothing. The second response is going to be that they see that there are challenges, that there are forces that is going to be impacting them, but they still do nothing about it. But there are also companies that do see it, but they put up a wrong response. And the fourth response I was able to see is that they see it, but somehow they put up a delayed response. Well, I mean, I have to tell you that, you know, it can be a mix of these responses, but I was able to typically kind of putting it into a simplified pattern. These were the 4 typical patterns I was able to see among the companies that were in the state of mediocrity or decay. Again, these companies they have all the ingredients. I can see this in countries, in companies, in communities. They have the ingredients, they have a top talent, they have money, but it's really, how are we going to use this? It's really the question of the how. And the reason why they are there in that state of mediocrity and decay is because of these 4 responses. But whereas the thriving companies, yes, if we are able to see it, they're really able to fix and respond, and they're able to prepare in advance because they see it. So this is really the time that we need to fix. If there's anything that we need to fix, that we got to fix it, we got to prepare also in advance. But if they are not able to see it, they're always ready for it. They have the courage to really confront these challenges. And so the key word here is that what's going to determine where we're going to be today is going to be our response. Our response, in other words, could be how we live in the present, what we do today. Never mind what we're going to be doing tomorrow. What's really important is how are we going to spend our time today, the choices that we make, the decisions that we make. Are we really making that intentional effort to understand what's going on around the world? Or are you just going to defer this to someone else? Because in the name of, I don't have the authority, I don't have the position. A lot of people are in that what we call the positional mindset, saying that, you know what, I am only allowed to do this. But one thing I want to point out here is that leadership goes beyond. It doesn't matter what kind of position or authority that you will hold on to. If this is the community that you are in, if this is the country that you are serving and that you're working, that you have decided to give your time to and for, then there is no position or authority. It is very important that we do the reality check, and we should be able to make the choices that will ultimately lead for our company to go on the growth path. And so today, in this present moment, how we live it, the choices that we make, the decision that we make is going to be very important. Why? Because that's going to then determine the type of system that we are going to be living in. If you're talking about in the context of a country, or in the context of a company, that's the type of system that we're going to be working in. It's an aggregate, depending on sort of how everyone in the system works and how they are spending the present moment. That's the type of the system that you are going to be living in. And that will ultimately determine where we are going to be in the moment, because today is actually a product of what we had done in the past. And what we do in the present is going to be giving rise to the type of future, depending on what we do today, right? And as I've told you, it's either growth, mediocrity, or decay. So the second principle here is going to be, leadership is being cognizant of how today's decision, the decision that we make, is going to determine our destiny. And specifically, I told you about the present, what we do in the present. We got to be both looking at the past, and we got to be looking at the future. Why at the past? Because what we are doing today, or how we are behaving, today, or the type of mindset that we carry today, is the product of the past. And so therefore, if there's anything that we need to fix that we have been carrying along these years, we call this legacies, right? We got to surface that and we got to repair it. Because if you don't surface them, if you don't repair them, that's the type of same mindset, same behavior that you are going to be carrying forward, which will then be the future, that you will see. At the same time, it is very important to look to the future as well. We got to be taking the effort to anticipate what the future holds. And whatever that we can anticipate, we got to be preparing in advance. And so I'd like to mention to you that today's decision requires both looking at the past and looking at the future. And it is very important that whatever we have been doing all the while that are good, whatever that we have done in the past that has led to where we are today, the good stuff that we got to continue to carry on. But whatever that we have carried from the past that no longer helps us moving forward, then we got to surface it, and we got to repair them. And this is one of the work that I do deeply, and I am very eager, because that was one of the reasons why, I just want to mention it out there, the Lehman Brothers, the company that I was in. It's a 153-year-old company. Back in the days, that was the Google, the Amazon, the Facebook of the times. The top 5 MBA school students, many of the people were really eager to work for this company. And in fact, the CEO of this company, a month before the collapse of this company, went to Wharton School and gave a wonderful talk on 5 principles of leadership. And that's exactly also the same reason why this whole company went down. It is very important that we should not be ashamed to look at the past and be bold enough to look at these things that no longer helps, or to an extent that hampers us from making the progress that we should. At the same time, we should be looking forward, anticipate whatever things that we need to, and prepare for that. The third question then is, why is making good choices so important? Why is making good choices today, how we spend time today, the decisions that we make today, is because ultimately we want to pursue growth. If your company as a whole is experiencing decay or mediocrity, there's a whole lot of work to do. But especially also in the thriving companies, there are still elements of decay and mediocrity. While other people are all caught up in, wow, we are doing well. Look at the numbers, look at the growth, look at how expanding, how rapidly we are growing and expanding. A lot of people may be fixated on those things. But leadership goes beyond, not just that, but really going beyond and seeing, really paying attention to the elements that are decaying or leading to mediocrity, and being able to direct people's attention that, yes, we really want this to continue, this growth to continue. In order for us to do that, then these are the elements that we got to surface and repair. Again, ultimately, leadership is really that we want to turn decay, mediocrity into growth. Growth, in other words, may mean progress. And progress, if you look into the dictionary, means 3 things. One is a movement. Movement means there is a momentum. It's not static. There's an action. There's an activity. So every day, I am engaged in some sort of an action, some sort of an activity, intentional activities. Activities with purpose, good intention. And that's the things that you do. It can be thinking, but it can be also doing something. Leadership is a movement. It's an intentional activity with good intention. And it is a movement that will ultimately lead to what? A better and a higher state. Something better. We are going to be feeling better than yesterday. We also have an expectation that tomorrow is going to be better than today. That's the movement. That's the intention that we are wanting to create. But also, growth means that the impact should be broadly shared. Mr. Adnan had mentioned about this. The impact to be broadly shared. It's not just for me. It's not just for me, but it's also for we. Very important. So the third part is going to be leadership is really bringing improvements to the reality that we are in. Whatever the reality that we are in, bringing an improvement to that reality. Because again, we have an aspiration. You want to give a better future for your children. If you want to do that, then a movement or some sort of an activity, good activity, has to be there. Lastly, so personally, how do I begin or where do I begin? That personal element of leadership is going to be very important. It is very important that what we do. And this is not about deferring because I don't have the authority. No, there are things that you can do. Despite that you have a limited authority, limited decision-making power, you still can do something. Now, these are the three elements that you really need. One is the head, hands, and the heart. Head, the knowledge, knowing, right? That's going to be important. We've been spending many years throughout our lives, especially in the earlier days, trying to memorize things, trying to learn things, the facts, the data, really what's going on around the world. We're trying to really bring a lot of knowledge into our head. But then just having a head is not important, is not going to be sufficient. You got to be doing something useful with what you know. It's really the doing of the knowing, right? If you have now learned something, then you got to be making use of that. That's what we call the hands, the skills, the actions. We should be able to generate some results. But personally, equally, if not more important, is going to be the heart. If you do not have the heart, because heart is going to be what's going to get you beyond your job scope. If you are very much limited to your job scope, then you become very clear, these are the things that you can do, these are the things that you can't do. And you're going to be always telling, people that, oh, this is only how much I can do. I am scared of going beyond my boundary. But leadership is really going beyond boundary. You're using your authority as a means to do something more meaningful with an intention that you want to see your organization survive and also to thrive. There's a lot of that hard part element in there. It's really the mindset and the values. It's about priorities. And I can tell you that one of the reasons why Lehman Brothers had collapsed was that we had incredible people with head and hands. And I can tell you that we had some of the world's best people with head and hands. Like, you know what happened if we don't have the heart? In a way, Lehman Brothers is an extreme case, but I see this a lot in many of the organizations. That there are a lot of people with head and hands. I know that some of the organizations do not even have head and hands, because a lot of people are having issues with people with skills, with knowledge, because we knowing the trends and all these things are really important. But what I'm trying to say here is that head and hands alone is not sufficient. And how do we really have head, hands, and heart? We really I know that a lot of the people here are from the HR, but it's really through the education. We need a lot of the exposure. That was also one of the reasons why Korea was able to really overcome the poverty. Back in the days, the US Embassy in 1964 had, described Korea as one of the most problematic and impossible country to overcome poverty. In fact, they were thinking that, this is the country that we should leave because this country has no hope. That is actually the wording used in the State Department or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs report that has been disclosed about 10 years ago. Here, leadership is about making things right. It's really doing the right things. And head, hands, and heart is going to be very important. And so do that reality check, the personal reality check in terms of where am I with the head, hands, and the heart. And that's going to give you what's the room that I need to improve on. And so just kind of going back to my first story, a place where I come from, a lot of people were, it was considered a country, completely helpless and hopeless. But it was, at least that one of the good things that the leaders have done was that they really valued education. And through education, and education should happen all throughout the life. It has to be your lifestyle. It has to be your culture. I can tell you that once, 3 years ago, I visited Samsung. And during the 1 hour lunch break, they go and have lunch quickly for 10 to 15 minutes. And the remaining time, they were really busy rushing towards learning something. The company was offering about 400, more or less of 400 courses, but people were really volunteering to learn. We didn't tell them. Samsung said, no, we don't require people to learn, but people are wanting to learn because this is going to make them relevant, stay relevant, and continue to add value to the economy, to Samsung, to the other companies. The essence of education is going to be very important. how we exercise leadership can be learned. We should continue to help people to embrace why leadership is important and how we can exercise the effective leadership so that our company, the companies that you represent, will continue to experience growth. And that was one of the reasons from a helpless and hopeless country, experiencing 38 years of Japanese colonial rule, followed by 3 years of Korean War, completely decimated. About 80% of the country was completely decimated, with 7 million people either displaced or dead. Feature forward in 1997, I know that Malaysia was able to really, exercise leadership to overcome 1997 crisis, but Korea wasn't able to. It was a country that has completely bankrupt. And IMF was not willing to give the money to Korea because we basically had nothing to sell other than selling the assets of the Korean companies. But you know what people did? People voluntarily came out and gave, as you can see in the picture here, people were giving out foreign currencies, their jewelries, their gold, purely on a voluntary basis. Again, this is the power of education. I think leadership, just like John F. Kennedy said, leadership and education are indispensable to one another. We need to continue, and we should consider education as an extremely, extremely important initiative. So this is how Korea was able to really change people's mindset from one of the most corrupt countries to a country that's relatively promising. And so this is really my talk today. And I'm just kind of sharing this with you, that my experience having worked with some of the companies, Korean companies or Japanese companies or global companies, these are some of the things I was able to observe, just kind of reflecting. And I was able to spend about 5 years at Harvard. And that was really the prime time for me to reflect the choices I've made in the past days. Why has companies become what they are today? Why has it become a Nokia, despite that they had 53% of the market share in the past? Why has it led to where it is today? And this was really the time I was able to reflect. And these are some of the stuff that I am sharing with you. And so one last comment I just want to give you is that, I think it is very important to set the right expectation for yourself. Don't just think of your role as an HR expert or HR, providing learning or things like that. But I hope that you have a greater expectation of yourself, and expect something great for yourself. Expect something great for your country. Expect something great for your company. And again, if you are just very much fixated on your job scope, then there are only so much that you can go. Consider your job as the means to do something great for your company. And this is going to require a lot of thinking. And I hope that you should be able to do great things for your company, for your country, and for the world. And so maybe, I don't know how long I have been speaking, but if I have some minutes, I'll be able to take some questions. But please feel free to connect with us, the Center for Agile Leadership. And thank you so much for your time to listen to my talk. Thank you very much.
Samuel, we do have a couple of questions here. Can I just get you to answer this one from Daniel Pang? How do we bridge the gap of power distance from both the leadership stance and also how to create a safe psychological space for executives?
Yeah, I mean, those are really wonderful questions. One thing I can say, and I don't want to go too much into details. One thing I'd like to mention to you is that it is very important that we define the problem right. And there are two different ways of defining the problem. One is defining the problem in a technical way. The other one is the adaptive. A technical part is where the problem definition is clear and the solution is clear. But adaptive problem, which is basically most of the problems that we deal with, are having to do with mindset. Now, it is very important that we don't define people as the problem. It is really that values and the loyalties and the losses that people have. And why people are feeling distant, there's a power distance, is because ultimately, even though you're working for the same company, you have different values and different priorities. And when there is a clash of priorities, then the bigger the power distance, for example. Especially in the Asian setting where the hierarchy is pretty much at play, right? And one of the things is that a lot of people actually define leadership or their work in the context of a position. And so, when you are thinking things from the positional standpoint, then this is really where that the silo kind of kicks in. These are my boundaries, these are my decision making, these are mine. That's yours. And that's also, that's basically the reason why people are feeling distant, because they're so protective of their own sort of what's in their boundary. And so it is very important that as an HR, we should be really, try to really understand what are people prioritizing, what are people fearing of losing, right? Because everyone do not like to lose things, but when you are in that positional mindset, people are going to always be aware, the changes that's taking place or any sort of disruptions. The very first question is going to be, how is this going to impact me, my position, and my authority? And so the more protective of your boundary, the more protective of your position, the more distance people are going to be feeling. I think emotional intelligence is one thing, but that's not sufficient. There's more than that. So I don't think I can go too much into detail. I do a whole exercise of really trying to scan what are the clashes of loyalties and the priorities, what are the power dynamics looking like. But in often a lot of the Asian companies, this is one of the serious problems. And in fact, I can tell you that this was also one of the reasons, among others, that Samsung has experienced this Galaxy Note 7 crisis. And through which, in this case, Samsung was able to respond. Even though it was a bit delayed, they were still able to get their acts right and able to use that crisis as an opportunity to really embrace a very important change for their own survival and growth. So in terms of the power distance, that's where people are very protective. People are very much fixated on that positional job scope mindset, and they're very protective of that. And that's why there is such a big gap or power distance. So I hope that I have answered maybe a part of your question, but yeah, that's what I can say. I forgot the second part of the question, but yeah, do you remember the second question? My apologies.
Yep. That was from both the leadership stance and also how to create a safe psychological space for executives.
Yes. Yeah. I think psychological safety is going to be very, very important. And I know that, I can also see this in Korea or in Japan too, but, there's not so much about talking going on, right? They seem to say that there's a lot of talking going on, but I can say that 90% or even more are very much work focused, right? So, if you're really talking about the work all the time, this becomes very functional, this becomes very manual, right? There is no sort of a human element in there. I think in the Korean context, yes, saving the face, the Asian culture of saving the face is very, very deeply ingrained. And so people do not want to offend other people's face or other people's authority. But a lot of the stuff happens behind or after the work, during the dinner or during the lunchtime, during the coffee break, that people are able to have a deeper conversation. I think again, if you're just so much fixated on your job scope, okay, if you are thinking about, okay, my job is director of operation, and so therefore my job description says number 1 to 10, this is what I'm supposed to do, and this is the reason why I am hired. If you're so much into that mindset, then your job is going to be work done, get the paycheck, work done, get the paycheck. It's going to be very manual. There's no really excitement to your life, right? That's why people are feeling conflicted, right? But that goes a bit beyond than that. Not just a job description, but going beyond. Whoever that you're working with, you're able to have some conversations with them, that you're able to build rapport, being able to build, that trust. And so when it comes to communication, you know, I know that everyone knows this, but you know, the logos is going to be very important. That facts, data, you know, these are going to be very important. Knowledge is going to be very important. But pathos is going to be very important as well. Pathos. You know, we use the word pathetic or empathy. That's where it comes from. Pathos is a Greek word, and that's about emotions, being able to connect with other people. It's not just like mechanical, but there's a little bit more than that, right? Because we are emotional human beings, right? And then, of course, we've got what we call the ethos, the ethics. This is where the reputation, the credibility, trust. So it's not just about the logos that we should be working, you know, on the basis of, but the pathos and ethos is going to be equally important. And if we are able to communicate this, and this is really the formula that has come up with by the Aristotle, you know, I mean, back in the days, many thousand years ago, even the days back in the days, people knew that this was the essence of communication. If we're able to do this, I think, you know, we are able to better connect. And so that is sort of like a simplified sort of a response to the question. And again, I believe that leadership can be learned, and we should continue to help people learn. This is a very important mandate. Okay.
Thank you so much, Samuel. That was really insightful. On behalf of everyone, I would like to thank you so much for your time. And everyone, there are a couple of questions in the Q&A box, and everyone wants to pick your brain. We were hoping you can get back to it after this talk. And so thank you so much, Samuel. And I just want to reiterate that the concept of you drawing from the past and from the present to let that guide what it is here and now in the present, it's just amazing. And thank you for inspiring and challenging us to take action with heart.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sure the audience would agree. And I love what Samuel said about leadership can be learned. So do expect great things from yourself and do great things. And can I just check in with the audience? How is your team doing physically and mentally in this climate? Let me know in the chat. How's everyone doing? How are you doing? How's your team doing? Put your responses into the chat. Because the next session that we're going to talk about is about employees' well-being. How can you protect your employees' well-being during COVID-19? The crisis really brings potential lethal physical health consequences for our workforces. But it also affects us mentally. It has mental health implications such as stress, fear, uncertainty. Let's look at what we have in the chat right now. Feeling cooped up, mentally exhausting. Someone saying, great and surviving. That's great for you. Go. Mentally exhausting. Team continues to be effective during the pandemic and remote working. Mentally exhausted. We keep communicating with each other every time. Resilient. That's really good. That's what we need in this time. There's a lot of people saying, like this Farid is saying anxious and mentally drained, challenging and managing it. In the next session, we have brought together an interesting panel to address what we have learned in 2020 and how do we nurture and support employees' well-being and create a positive employee experience moving forward. I'll kick off the conversation as the moderator, asking questions that will draw up some of the high-level themes and trends we should be thinking about and in regards to employees' well-being. And then the second half of our panel today, we will open the floor to give you an opportunity to ask your burning questions the entire industry has been asking about employee well-being. Sounds good? Again, I just want to remind you, the Q&A box is at the bottom. So as we go along, when you have your questions, we will go in order. So if you get your questions in first, we'll answer those first. As we go through a discussion, put in your question, put in your question in Q&A, put your insights into the chat box as well. So please allow me to invite our first panelist, Mr. Jonathan Chong. He is the Chief Risk Officer at M General Insurance Berhad. He is responsible for developing risk management strategies and practices to support the business in meeting its strategic objectives. So Mr. Jonathan, can I invite you to the stage and welcome to the panel?
Hey, hi. Thanks, Lilian, and good morning, fellow participants and esteemed speakers and panelists. Looking at this list of speakers here, it seems I'm the only odd one out from the risk perspective, where my fellow panelists are HR specialists. In a sense, I'll try to give my point of view and how we have actually maneuvered through 2020 in that sense, in sticking with the topic, what we learned in 2020, how to nurture and support staff well-being and a positive employee experience. If we could have my slides on the screen, is anyone sharing by any chance?
First of all, Mr. Jonathan, I would like to ask you this question, right?
Sure.
This really thought-provoking question. That is, how has your organization been transitioning to support employees over the last 1.5 years during the pandemic? And how have you shifted from business continuity mode to normalization? So maybe you can address this in your presentation.
Yeah, we'll do so. Yeah, Lilian, actually, is actually part of my presentation on how we have actually moved through the business continuity portion and how we have taken into consideration the employees' point of view. If we could move on to the slide number 2, essentially, what did we learn in 2020? If I could kickstart my presentation, I mean, it is a year full of acronyms, full of terminologies. We have seen MCO, CMCO, RMCO, EMCO, so many O's. And even in 2021, we still get MCO 2.0, MCO 3.0, and now we are in this NRP, National Recovery Phase, National Recovery Plan in that sense. But I think in a nutshell, 2020 is really a year full of uncertainty and changes. And I think Lilian mentioned earlier, and likewise in the chats, there are a lot of challenges from working from home. Sure, there are very good flexibilities, but the pandemic really drew upon us a lot of uncertainties and changes that require, especially from the insurance industry. I think the insurance industry, we are probably not built as agile and technology advanced as companies like Google or Microsoft in that sense. So when the COVID-19 infections actually crept up to 3 digits sometime around March 2020 last year, the government on 16th of March, actually announced the MCO and gave us a 2 days notice to actually adapt to the lockdown SOPs, and our employees were actually to work from home on short notice upon this announcement. And there were a lot of things that came across this announcement by the government. I would like to share from my organization point of view. We actually have a lot of employees who are on desktops rather than laptops. So this posed immediate operational risk and business continuity risk to us. And as senior management team, as well as together with other members of the companies, we actually pulled together through a crisis management team to actually discuss how do we address the risk and manage these uncertainties. Not just from our company's perspective, even our service providers, workshops, loss adjusters, and even our agents were also affected through this MCO. Workshops were unable to operate, which means that if you actually got into an accident, your car would probably be stuck in a workshop and it's not going to be repaired for the longest time, which means the livelihood of our customers also affected. And the manufacturing of the paint and body parts also all were suspended because they were unable to operate due to the MCO. So with these threats and uncertainties, we realized very quickly there was a very imminent threat to our business and as well as service levels. And true enough, in April 2020, the Malaysian Automotive Association actually reported that vehicle sales dropped nearly 100% in April 2020, which is not a good sign for us. And being an employee in the insurance company, and M General being one of the largest motor players in the industry, when we pick up the newspaper and read this kind of news, what runs through the employee's mind is, well, will our company pull through this pandemic? If our sales drop nearly 100%, will we still have our jobs? Will the company be able to continue? Right? And management was very, very quick to discuss the business implication. But on top of that, we were also focused, and one of our main topics of discussion in our crisis management team meeting was really on the safety and well-being of our employees, actually. But we balanced it very carefully to meeting our customers' needs, because while we had to send most of our employees to work from home, some of our critical functions like contact center, the tow trucks or the operators that you call in when you get to a accident, right? The hotlines, those still need to be operating in that sense. And what we learned, I think the main thing in 2020 is, we did a lot of BCP exercises, scenario analysis and things like that. But what COVID-19 really taught us in 2020, that corporate agility, management agility, and organizational agility was the most crucial to persevere through all these changes in that sense. And we move on to the next slide. When I say we focus on employees in a sense from a management perspective and jumping into this topic, when all these announcement of MCOs were made, immediately we could hear the noises from the ground, and we sent our leaders to the ground as well to speak to their staff and their colleagues. What are your concerns? And there's so many questions that came about because it was such a short notice, like I said, 2 days. Many people were very worried. Back then it was 100 cases. People were so worried. Today we are at 16,000, 17,000 cases a day, and people are even more worried now with the Delta variant. Back then, we could, if you can recall, we were actually very worried to go and do our grocery shopping, even at 100 cases. Some of us were quite unfortunate. We couldn't get face masks or sanitizers. It was sold out. People were hogging face masks and sanitizers. I remember buying a bottle of sanitizer myself, a small one, at I think a cost of $20 per bottle. And face masks, people were actually selling it at $3 per piece in that sense. And that still sold out very, very quickly. And employees couldn't get them. They're worried for their family members. They worried about their own safety. And the government also, well, not just the government, everyone was probably unclear how to handle this COVID-19. If you recall, most of us do not really have a clear idea what is the close contact when the pandemic first hit us. Some people say 15 minutes, some people say 1 meter, some people say 6 feet, which is effectively almost 2 meters. So there were a lot of questions of people's mind. Right? Some of our staff also stays at home with elderly parents. They are very worried to come to work. And they're asking the management, can we work from home? We are not comfortable to come to work because COVID-19 attacks the elderly. If you have a preconditioned illness, it will affect us a bit more. Food supply was also on their minds, right? If you recall, bread was even sold out, right? And the government even have to come out and say, please do not overstock your bread. We will have adequate supply of bread coming in. On top of that, employees were also worried about the work progress. Like I said, they're on desktops, they're not on laptops. And one of the very interesting thing that came about was when this work from home first came about, staff were also saying, I've ran out of internet data at home, right? Because their kids were at home, surfing the YouTubes at home, playing their games at home, having their online classes at home, and the spouses were also working from home. And we realized that employees actually have a lot of other matters outside the office environment that is actually happening while they are working from home. And we knew as management team that these are all actually points down to one thing. And I think the previously Samuel also mentioned this point. It's actually the uncertainty, right? The uncertainty of this COVID-19. And in the next slide, I actually have just shared one picture, and this picture will speak 1,000 words. This uncertainty actually is the worst state that our employees will be facing, right? With so many questions in their mind, with them being unclear what will happen to the company, unclear of what will happen to themselves, unclear how to deliver their work from home, unclear how their family, I think the most important is their family, how would they actually pull through this pandemic? And some people actually were worried about losing their jobs in a sense. So the word uncertainty was on our minds when we discussed these things at senior management level and the crisis management team. And we knew that we need to address this uncertainty, because if this uncertainty is not addressed, our employees will not be at the right state of mind to even perform at their role, and also to, be even functional as a family member or responsible parent, or in terms of supporting their family in that sense. So in managing these uncertainties, the senior management team actually in the next slide, through the crisis management team, actually have a lot of targeted discussions. And what we have done, we have actually spent quite a fair bit of money to ensure that these uncertainties are actually addressed and make sure that we give comfort to our staff, giving them a peace of mind in a sense. I mean, what we did was we actually went out and purchased sanitizers and face masks, even at high cost of amount of money, $2, $3, we did that. And we stocked it up in office so that people could actually come in to collect the mask if they want to for their home. And what we did also, we bought like internet dongles, laptops, even to support our staff working from home, because most of our staff, some of our staff actually have one laptop, but their kids will need their laptop, or the spouse will need their laptop to work from home in that sense. And we also, we also tried to create a safer working environment, because we need to address the concern of the staff who are worried to come to office to work. They're worried to get the infection from the office environment. And we actually installed office acrylic barriers up, workstations. It kind of look a bit like a factory now, but we did quite a nice design. It's transparent with a nice acrylic barrier. And that actually gave our employees comfort as well. And we ran a lot of pulse surveys with our employees as well, just to find out what we can do to make them feel safer at work, more comfortable at home, and also able to continue, living their lifestyle and contributing to the company in that sense. At one point of time during the MCO, restaurants were not even allowed customers to dine in. And what we did also, we didn't want our staff who were coming to office to walk out to tapao, to buy food and things like that. And we provided free packed lunch for our staff and things like that. But I think all things like that, there's a lot of changes that happened through the COVID-19. And we realized that one of the things that we need to do is to remain and keep engaged with our staff. I think we as Malaysians, we tend to have this human touch, human connectivity. We spend a lot of time mingling, right? And we love to makan. Makan is like the common theme for every Malaysians in the country. And this is where we also bond with our colleagues, right? Over lunch, like how Patrick has mentioned, over dinner and things like that. And these are the times whereby we actually talk to employees about things that is beyond work. And these are the things that also help employees feel that they belong to an organization, in my opinion, in that sense. So these engagements start to dwindle down with this work from home experience. But we try our best. I know from senior management team perspective, we try to have virtual e-lunches, right? Our CEO actually had a Raya e-lunch with some of our employees. We invited everyone, and we would just eat in front of the PC, and we would speak to each other about everything else that is apart from work, and finding out what is going on in everyone's life, and is there anything else we can do, and things like that. I think all in all, these uncertainties also pose a lot of concern for employees. I think some of the problems that came about, or our employees worry about, is will they be isolated when they come to work, especially those employees who are positive for COVID-19. And one of our shareholders company, IAG Australia, we had very close discussion with them. They actually shared with us to say that actually stress levels and staff depression also was something on their mind, and they are monitoring very, very closely. And in Malaysia, we also do notice that, working from home arising from this COVID-19, actually there was a spike in domestic violence reported in the country as well, as reported by the government. So our HR here also has been working very tirelessly, right, to ensure that there is sufficient consultation support available to employees who need them, especially if they are tested positive. They may feel depressed, or they may feel very down, or they may feel very worried in that sense. So we try to do our best to keep them positive, upbeat, and trying to reassure them that everything will be okay in that sense. I think in terms of that, what I want to say in a nutshell is, through these uncertainties, how we maneuver through these uncertainties as a company, we bring by a lot of changes to the organization, the way we work, right? Previously, we would all come to office, work in the office and things like that. But now in here, M General, we only got probably about 10% to 15% people in office now, and the 85% of people are working from home. And personally, for me, I have not physically met my entire team for the past 1 year already together in that sense. And that is a challenge for leaders in that sense. How do we keep our employee engaged? How do we do the simplest of things, like turning your camera on during the meeting, right? Because as people work from home, it is flexible. One of the participants actually said that it allows us the flexibility of working from home. But it is still nonetheless a change in the processes and the way we do things. And change is something that as leaders, we will need to address, because if we don't address the the impact of these changes, it will be actually quite damaging to the employment environment, as mentioned by Patrick as well. In the next slide, I just want to bring you all through the term change, in terms of uncertainty and change. I picked this slide off a lady named Ayada, right? She's actually Ayada Yamada. She's actually a Google change specialist. And I like her slides in the sense. I would like to just impart this to everyone in the sense. Why leaders, we have a very important role to play in these times of uncertainty where change is actually imminent and is actually happening. And very interestingly, in a survey poll done by Lillian earlier, for many of us as leaders actually responded that we are rated 4, rated 5, very happy and open to change and things like that. But I would like to just tease a bit of thoughts. Are our employees open to this change? And not just at the executive level, but at the clerical level, where the demographics may actually be a bit different from that sense. So looking at this picture, the message that I wanted to send is if we were to cross our arms the way we want to cross, and that's the normal way where we cross our arms, one hand up, one side down in that sense. But if on the immediate sense, if I were to ask you to switch the direction of how you cross your arms, like to do it the opposite side, most of us will find it very difficult to swap very, very immediately. And it will take a couple of practices, couple of guidances. You probably need to observe and look closely how you recross your arms again to make sure that you can recross your arms again in the same smooth manner as you normally do. Now, this message I would like to share because as much as we say, yep, we have adapted very well to this situation, we have adapted, to the COVID, the new norms and things like that. But I think we really need to take a very closer look at how things have really changed and how things are going to change moving forward. And if, as leaders and of the industry and leaders of our company, if we don't focus enough on these changes and the possible implications that it will have to our employees, then I think we would not be able to move the company towards the new era of operating in that sense. In the next slide, probably my last slide, I do not want to take too much of the time here because we are in a panel discussion. I think most of the talk out there is the term new normal came about when COVID-19 first came about. But we have actually moved to the now normal, which is actually BAU. Since March 2020 to July 2021, we can't use the term new normal anymore. It has become BAU and the now normal. And I think as leaders of the company, and I do have ideas bouncing off with the HR of my department as well, what is the next normal? Will we be having hybrid offices next time? Will we be cutting office environments? How will we deal with new joiners? How will we tell the new joiner that, oh, actually, you just need to come to work 2 days out of a week and the other 3 days you work from home? And how do you keep them engaged in that sense? And how do you use industry data to actually decide when to bring people back to the office? As much as we can over here, we actually use some of our actuarial boys and girls. They actually look into the industry statistic to actually predict the number of cases in the country as well. And this will actually help management also guide to see whether or not we want to increase work capacity or to increase work from home capabilities in the sense. But end of the day, it kind of clouds how we want to term the definition of workspace. Previously, if you were to work in the office, that is your workspace. Now we spend 90%, 99%, 95% of our time working from home. And I think it is time for us as leaders to actually relook into the next normal. Is our home the new workspace? Do we now need to provide back supporting chairs for employees who work from home? Because if not, then there'll be, those who have existing back problems will suffer from prolonged back pain, even, working from home for prolonged basis. What if somebody slips and falls at home? Will that be a workplace liability? So I think a lot of questions will start to come about as we move into this next normal. And in this next normal also, I think we still need to look at maintaining the human touch. And I think Patrick also mentioned that, this meaningful relationship, trust, is very important to build, to actually effectively function as a company and as a team. Trust is very important. And human touch, we will be losing it if we continue to work on this digital environment where there is no physical interaction. Everything is on camera, and some of the guys don't even on the cameras in meetings and things like that. So we need to continue to encourage meaningful discussion with our employees in that sense. And I think end of the day, it will really boil down to the last point I want to measure here is how do companies now create a new and sustainable engagement initiatives in the past. We will always do employee engagement surveys, which I think most insurance companies also run your engagement surveys. And I wouldn't be surprised if many companies' engagement scores actually go down lower compared to the last year, because there is just not much you can do virtually as compared to what you can do physically in office. I think it'll be a long time again before we see a departmental lunch or a company Hari Raya makan together and things like that because of this COVID situation. And these are the things that IM General is actually looking at from a HR perspective. We are considering all these things. And I hope that everyone else, in their respective companies are also looking into this or more. I'm sure my other esteemed panelists will probably have other things to add on in that sense. But this effectively brings an end to my presentation. I hope that I'm able to share what we have done in M General in wake of the COVID-19 pandemic and how it has affected us, how our employees were affected, and how they were concerned about the uncertainties and how we have adapted to manage their concerns and also answer their questions.
Thank you, Jonathan. And we will be also talking about a roundtable, industry-wide roundtable with one of our panelists at the end of this panel as well. I really appreciate your thoughts on how change has impacted M General and how quickly M General was able to adapt to these changes. And I would like to please stay on the stage while I invite the second panelist, Ms. Wong Woon Man, Group Head of Human Resources at Allianz Malaysia Berhad. With over 27 years of experience in HR, she is passionate about creating culture change by embedding values and behaviors to drive a high-performing and customer-centric organization. So, Ms. Wong, tapping into your expertise, can you share with us how HR has supported in creating a positive employee experience despite the challenging times? How have the people-related strategies shifted for you?
Sure, and thank you very much, Lillian, for the introduction, and good morning, everyone. So Jonathan has actually provided a very, I would say, detailed background about, the learnings over the past 1.5 years and where we are today. So I would like to just carry on from that thought and zoom in straight to some of the learnings for us in Allianz. And what are some of the employee experience moments that really matter for us and what we are currently working on as well. So you could help me advance to the next slide. Typically over the last many years, right, whenever we hear the word employee experience, what comes to mind very quickly is this entire employee life cycle, from the time of a talent being attracted to when we onboard the person, to retention, to reward, and eventually until the person exits or offboard. And that has always been in the context of the workplace, right? The physical office. But today we realize that as we evolve, and the learning from the pandemic is really work life and home life are all already intertwined or integrated. And so when we think about employee experience, it is really with this context in mind that employee experience now needs to shift towards more live experience, right? Because it is not just about what happens in the office anymore, but really that new workplace, which is now home, and what happens at home, right? We've got to be able to support that experience as well. And the other aspect that has changed and will change into the future is this. Over the last 1.5 years, a lot of our communication has revolved around creating security, creating the sense of stability and safety for our people. You can term this to be crisis communication. So a lot of what we have been communicating with our colleagues have been centered around, of course, COVID-19 and how to protect oneself and how to be safe. Now, that conversation, I believe, will continue to be there. But in addition to that, we've got to now transition that communication into really the new normal. And what that new normal entails for us is beyond security and safety and so on, we've got to also constantly talk about well-being and productivity, right? Because these are two interlinked topics as well. And just to share with you some things that we have started in Allianz, if I could move on to the next slide. It's probably, the one that I will stay on for a couple of minutes. So we are already talking about the new way of working, right? And where the new way of working is concerned, there are these 4 dimensions that are very important that we're looking at. Number one, needless to say, is about our customers, right? Because essentially, all of us, we still have a business to operate, we have a business to run, we have customers to serve, right? So in the new normal, it's really now about how do we adapt and how do we get employees to adapt quickly to be able to simplify a lot more processes for our customers, right? Customers are also expecting things to be instant, to be more digital, and we are able to have a wider reach of our customers. So all these require really adaptability and being able to be agile, right? So that, in a way, impacts employee experience as well. Now, on the other hand, in terms of the employee personal experience, what are these areas that we are currently looking at? We believe that safety and health will continue to be a key concern for everyone, right? So some of the learnings from our side is, well, at the start of the pandemic last year, we decided that we would appoint, right, an internal or in-house medical advisor. And I must say that that's really one of the best decisions that we have made so far, in a sense that, you know, we were able to have medical expert advice to help us maneuver through this crisis. Someone who is there, who is able to support our employees beyond, beyond just work matters. It is also about safety and health, right? When a family is infected, when he or she is infected, what do they do? Yeah, and at the same time, we have also provided, right, colleagues who are in the essential functions. So we call them, right, those who are in the front line, contact center and so on, who were required to come back to the office. So in addition to supporting them, right, with meals that are delivered to the office, those who are taking public transportation, for example, we have also provided them, let's say, with Grab rides, right? So these are, you can say, practical things that I believe matters when it comes to safety and health. In addition to that, yes, we also ran our own vaccination program. So that's the focus today. And moving forward, right, this whole topic of safety and health will continue to evolve. And I believe that in the entire employee experience, this remains a core. At the same time, right, as we evolve into that new way of working, I believe hybrid is going to be certainly the new norm, right? It's going to be a hybrid of some days I will be required to come back to the office. Most of the time, I don't need to, right? And this is an area that we are already working on in terms of redefining our policies, reviewing benefits of employees. And on top of that, what is a positive outcome from this flexibility is really the fact that when we talk flexibility today, it's beyond just location, right? It's also about time. And what I mean by this is it has opened up a whole new opportunities for our employees as well when it comes to development and their own career management. So gone are the days when, you know, if there was an opening in maybe head office and I'm from the branch, it requires me to be physically located, right? Relocated to head office, for example. But today, that will change, right? Because we say that with the new way of working with hybrid model, geography is no longer a constraint. Where you are located is no longer a constraint. So that opens up a whole set of opportunities for our people as well. And needless to say as well, the topic of well-being will continue to be a key focus beyond just physical, mental, and social well-being. Also not forgetting, right, the financial aspect. So meaning to say, the new employee experience will require all of us, right, as leaders, to consider the entire total wellness of our colleagues beyond just the physical aspect. Now, on the other side is, of course, leadership. And you've heard a lot from Samuel earlier on. And I just like to echo, right, some of the things that he mentioned. for this hybrid working to thrive, really it's about a whole mindset shift when it comes to leadership, right? Leadership today will require a lot more empathy, will require a lot more listening in, tuning in, understanding that, you know, our colleagues are doing the best in whatever circumstances they are. So that level of trust has to be established. And also the importance of having less biasness, because I know it is always so easy, right, to consider the person who is in the office whom I can see, and to be biased, to think that that person is probably more productive, right? That's compared to someone who is remotely working, whom I can't see or interact on a daily basis. So these biasness has got to be corrected. And at the same time, right, it's also about a new way of managing performance. So all these will affect employee experience as well. And what we mean by a new way of managing performance is beyond the current way of how we are used to tracking performance, right? So I get that there are a lot of productivity tools out there, which typically measure, let's say, the time you clock in and the time you clock out. But again, going forward, is really that the measure of productivity. And I believe that that's really not the way that productivity should be measured going forward, right? It's not about time spent, it's really about the outcome, it's about results. So that is another paradigm shift of our leadership. And certainly, you know, it is work in progress for us in Allianz as well, as we try to embed this thinking among our leaders as well. And this whole topic about purpose, right? So if at one time, whenever you hear purpose statement, it used to be a nice, maybe slogan on the wall, but going forward, it's really now, to me, an opportunity for us to reignite that purpose, right? Because the pandemic has also taught us a lot of things that we should be appreciative of, that we should be thankful for, right? And that there are also a lot of people who are struggling out there, that everyone is vulnerable. So it gives us a greater sense of energy and purpose as to who we are, right, and what we stand for. And I believe that for us in the insurance industry, we really have this great opportunity to stand for something, right? Because we are in the business of protection. We are in the business of providing security.
So
and
well
yes.
said. So well said, Ms. Wong.
Yeah, thanks.
I would like to actually, like, thank you so much for sharing with us, like, on how Allianz is managing this and like how we can all benefit from the insights that you've shared with us. I would like to invite our next panel, Ms. Darshini M. Nathan, who heads culture and engagement at AIA Berhad, to talk about how culture drives employee engagement in AIA and if the pandemic has changed any priorities.
Thanks, Lillian. And firstly, thank you, Piam and MII for inviting me to speak on this topic. It's so close to AIA's heart. And, you know, I was very pleased to hear Woonman talk about purpose because, you know, to your question on how culture drives employee engagement in AIA, AIA is a purpose-led organization in that everything that we do needs to align to the reason we exist, which is really to help people live healthier, longer, and better lives. And, you know, we also believe that when our people can see why they come to work every day and the impact that their work has on others, it really gives meaning to what they do. And they establish an emotional connection with their work. So that's when engagement really happens. And so all our culture building and strengthening efforts are geared towards creating the conditions that would support our people to bring our purpose to life through their work every day, to give their best, and also to bring out the best in others whom they work with. So in this respect, we're guided by two things in AIA. Number one, we have our operating philosophy, which calls for us to do the right thing in the right way with the right people. And number two, we also have a set of behaviors which we call AIA's leadership essentials. And at whichever level you're at in our organization, our people are called on to demonstrate those behaviors. And 50% of an individual's performance is tied to those observable behaviors. So to your question on whether the pandemic changed our priorities, I'm pleased to say that the answer is no, because this has been our focus for several years now. But it did call for us to tweak our approach and how we reach out to our people. Health and safety was very naturally our top priority. We had the benefit also of seeing what was already happening, with our colleagues in AIA China who experienced this, months ahead of us. So we had the benefit of learnings, and we were, quite a bit more prepared, I would say, in that sense. Our long-standing focus on health and wellness actually put us in a good position, to think of all the other ways that we would support our people. And I won't go into that now because, Joan is going to come up shortly and she's going to share a bit more on that as well. So that in a nutshell is how culture and employee engagement intersect in AIA. Thanks.
Thank you, Darshini. Thank you for sharing with us how AIA is putting your people, your employees at the forefront of this whole transformation. And finally, I'd like to invite a mental health expert to join us in this conversation. So please welcome Ms. Joan Lau, the founder and chief executive officer of Thoughtful, a digital mental health startup whose vision is to make mental health seamless, accessible, and affordable in Asia. So good to have you here, Joan. Can you provide us with insights as to how the issue of employee mental health has evolved across the region internationally, and if it is a priority here in Malaysia, and how serious is this issue?
Sure, no problem. Thank you so much, Lillian, and thank you, MII and also PM for organizing this very important event and panel, of course, and also all the esteemed speakers just now. Maybe a quick introduction. My name is Joan Lau, and I'm the founder and CEO of Thoughtful. I'm actually based in Singapore now, but we have operations across Southeast Asia, Malaysia being one of our big markets. So Thoughtful is a digital mental health company, really, and our vision is to make mental health care access more seamless and affordable. So we mostly work with employers. I understand there are a lot of employees here, and particularly insurers as well, to bring end-to-end mental health solutions for either their policy holders as well as their employees. I think right now, if there's one thing that I've noticed from all my previous panel speakers, whether it was Jonathan or Ms. Wong, I think, is the fact that safety and well-being is a priority. And I would add to that, building a resilient and productive workforce is also a very big priority. So how we'll do this today, I'll just give a very quick overview on just the landscape of mental health, what it is, what it isn't, share some of the best practices as well. And I think a lot of the questions that I noticed in the Q&A, whether, Daniel Pang, I know you had a question on psychological safety earlier in the previous panel. There are also questions in terms of how to navigate, leadership in this time and prioritize our own mental health. I think we'll have the privilege to have a deeper dive Q&A with, Darshini and myself, where we will actually, speak about our experience partnering with AIA from the very beginning of the pandemic last year in helping, people, leaders, as well as employees navigate all of this and really navigate it with poise and empathy. So there'll be a lot of actionable tips and tools, so stay tuned for that. Could we have the next slide, please, Haz? Thank you. So I think one of the things that is undoubtedly true is the fact that we've all been in lockdown, whether it's, in Malaysia as well as in Singapore. I think we thought that, this was a 2020 punya pasal, but it's not. It's definitely something that's very much still continuing. And I think this prolonged socially distanced kind of work and living is really taking a toll on mental well-being, right? Which is why it is one of the top priorities, if not last year, then certainly this year for employers. Just to share a little bit of statistics here. Now, 3 out of 4 workers or employees have actually struggled at work due to just anxiety caused by the externalities, whether it's COVID, whether it is the changes in work environment, financial environment, family environment, home-based learning, for example, for parents have been quite a lot to handle. And so I think in general, there's been an increase in terms of stress and anxiety, and to a large extent for some people, depression and burnout as well. As a result, what we do see is that 64 working days are actually lost by ASEAN corporates. And this literally means that out of the 12 months of the year, you have about 2.5 months of lost productivity when we do not, prioritize mental well-being. This could come in the form of presenteeism, where people show up at work, but they're not really, there to work productively, or absenteeism, when they just, they cannot show up for work at all. And I think this has obviously very huge costs for companies across the board. Now, in terms of what is seen as the #1 health risk factor right now, of course, apart from the very big elephant in the room, which is COVID, I think stress has been cited as the #1 naturally, just because of everything that's happening around. And so with this, what we're seeing is an accelerated focus, not just on physical well-being, which I think we've seen more and more companies be more proactive about in the last, I would say, 5 years. But in the last 18 to 24 months, there's also a huge priority on mental well-being. And we're seeing this coming not just from, ground up, where you have employees raising their concerns, but also top down, where you have governments coming out to say that it is an epidemic in and of itself. Here in Singapore, for example, there are tripartite commissions that have been set up by the government. In Malaysia, for example, you also have the Ministry of Health citing all the stats and resources that are available as well. So I think there's a lot of reasons as to why this is now a priority, and I think people are also realizing the ROI for that, right? Because for every dollar spent in terms of mental health safeguarding for an employee, will result in almost like a 4 times return. And again, this comes in productivity, reduction in absenteeism, and also increase in performance when they are present at work. Has next slide, please. I think for some people, one of the themes or questions that we do get is, is mental health a passing phase? Is it something that we're looking into now because there is a pandemic? The answer for that is absolutely not. Mental health is definitely not an epidemic that is a passing phase. It's not going to just end when COVID-19 ends. I think if there's one thing that we can learn from past pandemics, is that from SARS, right? So for example, post the outbreak of SARS, even though the physical disease of SARS had already subsided and was under control, the psychological effects, whether it was in the shape of anxiety, prolonged anxiety, or whether it was in the shape of post-traumatic stress disorder, this was actually very prevalent over the long term for up to more than 10 years. And so this is something that will certainly not just end overnight once everyone gets vaccinated. It's something that we should be proactively and preemptively looking into from today, if not from tomorrow. So next slide, please. So I think this begs the question, right? Like, what are we doing today to actually safeguard our employees' mental well-being? Traditionally, next slide, please. Traditionally, what we do see is the more traditional aspects of taking care of well-being, so to speak. What I mean by this is that the concept of employee assistance programs is actually quite new here in Asia, and specifically when it comes to providing or building the mental health infrastructure within a company. I think this is something that's very new for most Asian companies, and even for MNCs, I think the ways of doing it has evolved to include the digital aspect. So what we normally see for companies companies that have done something for mental well-being, usually it's organizing, a webinar. It could be something very ad hoc, right? They've organized a webinar, or traditionally what they would have is a mental health week, or a well-being month, or a well-being day, and they get vendors to come in and maybe run an online meditation class or a webinar on mental health, and then that's kind of it, right? It's a 1 week affair, and then for the rest of the year, there's not much emphasis on mental well-being. What we do see is a huge change in that. One, because I think we realize now that that's not enough. Two, I think we also realize now that the needs and fundamentals have changed from just doing awareness building and education type of initiatives to actually allowing people, your employees, to take action. So we've moved from just awareness to now taking action. And so whenever, companies are thinking of, how to take care of your employee well-being, I would I suggest, or maybe ask these 4 questions, right? Is the program consistent? Is it going to be something that's one-off, or is it going to be ongoing? Is it sustainable? Meaning to say that after you have that webinar, is there any resource or channel for your employees to continue that learning, or to continue taking proactive steps? Which then comes to the third question: is it actionable? Is it something where they go there, hear, oh, great, very fun, and then they move on and forget about it? Or is it something that they can act upon? This is where the ROI comes in, right? Because you can run as many, webinars as possible, but if there are no proper channels, infrastructure, and resources for employees to then take action, then you're not going to see any, meaningful outcomes, which is something we are very driven by. And I guess finally, to be a bit cheeky here, is the program thoughtfully put together, or was it just thrown because it had to be? So I think all of these 4 questions are very pertinent questions to ask, and happy to have a conversation after in terms of getting a better understanding of what's needed. I'll share a little bit about what we'll do post this webinar as well, post this event, again, about sustainability and actionability. We will have a closed door roundtable for all HR people within this industry, if needed, for a free needs analysis and all of that. More to share at the end. Hans, next slide, please. So I think in terms of, all these initiatives that are being put up, I think one thing that we find that's very interesting is sometimes there is a bit of a disconnect between what happens at the top and what is really perceived at the middle levels and below. So interesting fact here, and this was, published by Forbes not too long ago, 96% of CEOs actually think that their companies are doing enough in terms of mental health for their employees. But actually only 69% of employees agree with this. So there is always a bit of a disconnect. And I think that's something that, is worth diving into. Next, please, Hans. I'll just give a very quick introduction of what we do, and then I think we'll let the discussion between AIA and ourselves kind of lead the way in terms of actionable items. So really how thoughtful is in our focus. We work with companies to build more resilient and productive workforces with you. And so, we provide both app-based and also non-app-based programs to bring a very holistic end-to-end mental health solution and infrastructure for the company. I think I'll just speak a little bit more about the app as well. So for the app-based parts, Thoughtful Chat is our app. And this is really a mobile platform where we empower employees to engage preemptively and proactively. Before even a crisis happens, we want them to be already, engaging with their mental health. And we do that by connecting them with qualified mental health professionals. So all of them are counselors and psychologists for one-on-one bite-sized coaching. And we also provide them with a suite of self-driven tools that they can access at any time and anywhere. And so our model is a bit different because it is preemptive and proactive. So really how it works is, your employees can text anytime, anywhere. They can sign up discreetly, and the coaches will check in asynchronously within 24 hours for a very high touch point service. So no waiting times, no long hours of waiting for that 1 hour session and then waiting again for your next appointment. There's also a lot of ongoing tracking that happens. So everything from mood trackers to thought journals to also clinical assessments within the app for stress, anxiety, and depression. So this, from an employee perspective, actually gives a lot of insight and transparency into how effective the program is, and also how things are being progressed from on an aggregated and confidential level, of course. Maybe the next slide has. Thanks. So the approach is a bit different. We do take a two-pronged approach here when we work with companies. One is to empower them with the resources to take action and sustain the ongoing engagement with their mental health. We do that through the app so that they can, enable behavioral change over time. And the second prong is to also activate them on all levels of the organization. So whether it's through education, whether it's through different types of initiatives, targeted or non-targeted, the aim here is to make sure that it's not one-off, it's consistent, and we can reduce that prevalence of work-related stress. Next has. So it's very different from traditional EAPs. If, let's say, for example, you are familiar with the more traditional sense, I think traditional EAPs are usually more focused on the curative, meaning to say crisis intervention. So, hotlines and things like that. What we found is that because there is still a very big stigma in Asia for mental health, utilization rates of that and therefore ROI on these kind of investments can tend to be a bit lower. Utilization rates are usually about 1 to 3% in the traditional sense. I think for our approach, which is taking a more digital first proactive approach, I think what we do see is that our utilization rates can be anywhere between 15 to 20% depending on the company. So I think instead of taking a more reactive approach, we like to be more proactive, and because of that, instead of the singular clinical approach of pure therapy, when we focus on the wider population of everyone, so not just people who are already in the throes of deep depression or anxiety disorders, when we're focusing on the preventive part of the population, which is the majority, of course, we integrate both talk therapy as well as coaching methodologies together in our behavioral change framework. Next has. So the entire user journey is very simple. I think, I won't go so deep into this. I'll just lightly touch upon it. But imagine if you're an employee, you can discreetly sign up for Thoughtful Chat. For those who are interested to learn more about, what mental health is, what are the things you can explore on your own pace. There is a learn feature with bite-sized lessons that you can access at any time. Everything's very short because majority of our users are between 25 to 45 years old, which means that their attention span is about 4 minutes maximum. So everything's very short and very crisp. For those who are ready to engage with what we call coaches, but again, they're all counselors and psychologists, our algorithms will find their best fit professional instantly. All the credentials of their professionals are there so that they can choose from the top 3 that have been provided. And at any time, if it doesn't work, they can always change. So we remove the barrier of figuring out who works best for them. We remove the barrier of, oh, if it doesn't work out, I'm just going to drop off. We want to make sure they have the ability to retain and consistently engage. And once they match, then they have a one-on-one conversation throughout the entire journey for however long they need. And they can always track their progress, which I think is the most fun part when we have a sense of advancement. Next has. So right now we are, building the largest multidisciplinary mental health professional network in the region. We have professionals across 12 locations now in 4 different countries, representing 9 different languages. So all the dialects, local dialects and languages are covered. We've also added Indonesian, Burmese, as well as Thai. So all our professionals are 100% qualified counselors and psychologists. We vet them, we train them, and then we retrain them along the way for digital, as well as non-digital. So I'll just stop here. Has next slide, please. I'm sure there will be questions along the way. Lillian, please, do jump in if there are questions in the Q&A. But I guess, what would really bring this to life is to invite Darshini onto the stage. And I think it's always wonderful to, really have a concrete kind of discussion. It's great to talk about philosophy and theory and what we put in practice, but really, how does it play out on the ground? I think that's always most important. So let's have a thoughtful chat with Darshini from AIA. Hi, Darshini. Hello. Oh, I cannot hear you, Darshini. Yes, I can hear now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear
All right.
you. Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'll just ask a couple of questions to kick it off. But again, if there are questions from the crowd, please jump in at any time, and we can always take them as well. We're very open. So maybe to start off, Darshini, how did AIA come to know about Thoughtful, and perhaps how did this partnership come to be?
Yeah, so John, I spoke earlier about AIA's purpose and, leadership behaviors, right? So for us to help Malaysians live healthier, longer, better lives, we as employees of AIA, we need to be able to demonstrate that ourselves. So for employees, our journey to better health really started over 5 years ago. But in the early years, the focus was very much on the physical aspects of health. We focused a lot on our people's fitness, nutrition levels and stuff like that. But then in 2019, as we progressed, we were looking at ways to, make the program a bit more comprehensive. And we were actually already looking at aspects of mental health. So we started on what you would call a standard EAP program. And we were doing the usual stuff like health talks and lunch and learn sessions during, lunchtime. And then the pandemic hit and just turned everything on its head. And we knew that, that would call for a sharper focus on mental health, because things had literally changed overnight. And we knew that our people were dealing with their own set of challenges, so much of uncertainty, fear, and anxiety. And yet with insurance being an essential service, we really needed our people to be able to cope and to build that much needed resilience so they could continue to do what they do best every day. So we were quite lucky, I would say as well, that it was around that time that our vitality team, I recall that they were already doing something with Thoughtful, and they knew that HR was looking for ways to introduce a more comprehensive mental health element into our program for our employees. So they connected us, right? And what really sold us to Thoughtful were two things, really. It was your digital platform, which really enables people to connect with Thoughtful's professionals using your app. And that was just so important during that time because, everything was digital and it was not going to be possible for people to step out of their houses and, make it for a face-to-face appointment. So that was really great. And like you mentioned earlier, we know that there is this stigma attached to going and seeing, a counselor or, to have these kind of conversations. So that element of anonymity, I think, really helped as well. And the second part, it was really, Thoughtful's focus on preventive one-to-one coaching, which means that, an individual doesn't have to have a serious problem in order to use the app. It's really for anyone who just wants to talk to a trained third party who can offer a different perspective as well as advice on coping tips and strategies to really prevent that issue from spiraling. And in this sense, this is very much in line with AIA's preventive and proactive approach to health and wellness in general.
Thank you so much, Darshini, for sharing that. I think it's, very serendipitous. I think we've been working with Vitality for a while, and then things, kind of progress internally. And I think we've had a very productive and meaningful relationship since then.
I have to echo that, very meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest questions that companies usually have, especially from HR's point of view as well, is that, the intentions are always there to, drive initiatives and bring this out. But then sometimes, they're not quite sure how to make sure it's launched successfully so that adoption and also utilization happens. So maybe, Darshini, if you don't mind sharing a little bit, how did we actually launch this program? And how do you think that was different from other initiatives?
Yeah, so we took an all-round organizational approach, and we really approached it like a marketing campaign, right? So it started with leadership setting the tone at the top, and for this, what we did is we did a series of interviews which we recorded, starting with our CEO and several exco members, and we asked them to share quite authentically, some of the challenges they have faced in the past, where it had to do with things maybe even in their personal or professional lives where it was, a drastic change, and even they, took some time to cope and overcome, right? And all of it ended with the message that it's okay to be feeling that way, and it's okay to not be okay, but also know that this help is now available for you. So that's how we got our leadership very involved in this. And then we also talked a lot about how do we help people understand that this is not for people who have serious problems. This can be for any one of you, because we're all going through this change, but we're all having different challenges depending on our situation at home, family members, and the situation we're having, coping with all the changes that I having at work as well. So what we did was we introduced a series of webinars where we carefully selected the topics to ensure that people will know that, oh yeah, that kind of resonates with me. That's what I'm feeling right now. So we got them involved through the webinars, and through the webinars, we got them onto the app. So that really helped. And what we did was we looked at all our existing communication platforms, and anywhere where we could plug these messages, these key messages on mental health, we used those platforms to our advantage. So, CEO will talk about it during town hall. When we had division town halls, we would get the thoughtful team to drop in and also, share about the app and share about, what kind of support they could get from it. So it was really a very all-round approach, you could say, a bit in your face, but I think it really helped.
Yes. In this situation, there's never a meaning of too much, I think, especially when we're working to normalize the conversation. So I think Has brought up this pyramid because I think at any one point, we have to recognize that each organization has multiple layers and levels to it. And I think, and we've worked with many other companies since then, both, in Malaysia and here in Singapore as well. And I think AIA has probably been the most proactive and comprehensive in terms of taking an all-rounded approach from an organizational perspective. So hats off, Darshini and team, because really it's been one of the most successful launches we've seen to date. I think maybe the other aspect that is worth diving a bit deeper into as well, Darshini, would be on the implementation. So I think, the rah-rah usually happens in the beginning, right? When we have the launch of the program, and then you have everything all over in your face for a good, month or so, and then things kind of, settle down a little bit. So how did we sustain that momentum? What was it that we did that was a bit more consistent versus what was ad hoc? Were there targeted or non-targeted kind of initiatives that we ran to remain that momentum?
Yeah, so what we've been doing in terms of ongoing support is we make it very known to our people that this is a free service that is available to all AIA Malaysia employees. So that support is ongoing for our general population. Then along the way, as our senior leaders get to know about the kind of support that they can get for Thoughtful, they have also approached us, and where we see that maybe there are some engagement gaps, and it has to do with the way the teams are coming together, the way they're collaborating, leadership styles and stuff like that. We have also approached Thoughtful to talk about more targeted support that we could provide those teams. So right now, in order to sustaining the momentum for us is really about having that ongoing support that is available to everyone, and reinforcing that or supplementing that with also these targeted interventions that we do with particular groups of employees or teams, depending on the situation and the challenges that they are facing. Yeah.
Actually, that's a great segue into one of the questions that the audience has asked. I would like to pass this question on and open it to the floor to Jonathan and Woonman as well, to come to maybe share your thoughts on this. So this attendee said that the lack of empathy from employer or bosses and pressure on KPI achievements put a lot of stress on already stressed out employee. So they're asking, how do you manage this from mental space point of view? Woonman, Jonathan, would you like to chime in on this as well?
Sure. Maybe I could start it off and just build on that. I think there were two questions on empathy. If I were to look at it, I think one is from the aspect of the employee and the other one is from the aspect of the employer. So this question that you have just mentioned, Lillian, is from the aspect of the employee, right? This sense of having too much and feeling all stressed out and so on. And I think that's really a current phenomenon, if I can use the word. I think it goes back again to, very thoughtful leadership, in a sense that, even before the pandemic, we were already dealing with KPIs and so on, right? It's just that I believe the pressure, because we are all in different locations, and gone were those days when we could just assemble everyone and make sure that the KPIs and whatever key messages are delivered, to everyone at one go. So hence, because of this remote way of working, there is a lot more need for us to constantly maybe reiterate our messages and so on. So to the leaders and all, the good news is that, of course, leadership can be learned and it has got to be intentional, right? So empathy is really about putting ourselves in the position of our employees. So before I make that call, before I send off that email, before I call for that meeting or whatever, it's really now to stop and think, all right, what is that key message that I want to drive? How does it relate back to the objective? And I think that as leaders, sometimes we are guilty of trying to do too many things, and we lack that sense of priority. So I think that tone at the top has got to be set right as well, in that, let's really focus on the 1, 2, 3 priorities that really make sense. And to the employee, if you're feeling that, really reach out, because I think we're not doing that enough, right? So there's really nothing wrong with going to the manager and say, hey, I'm sorry, but I really feel like I'm drowning, right? Can you just help me to prioritize? So I think it's just this two-way thing. Yeah, over to the rest of the panelists.
I just want to chip in on the question. I think the question points to one particular point. The question points that my boss puts pressure on me. And I think the common tone of HR is always a leader rather than a boss. So if you're calling the person a boss, then maybe it's really the senior management, really, or the person involved, like what Ms. Wong has said, need to really adopt a leadership style rather than a boss command and conquer kind of style. And I think these kind of things has to be escalated up. Don't be shy, speak up. There are other ways to speak up, not to your direct supervisor. Maybe there are other means to speak to. There are other people you can speak to in the organization. That's maybe one way to look at it. But maybe just to round it up a little bit, when work from home truly came about, yeah, there are a lot of stress. And if I'm very honest, I do hear from the industry that people leaders even fear at the thought of work from home, the first question is, how are employees really working from home? Will they be, shortchanging us, as staff? And my response to those questions, we need to trust our employees. We need to trust them, and then only they can trust us again. End of the day, I think the important thing is the ability to deliver. So I think if the employee cannot deliver the KPI on whatever reason, like is it because of infra, is it because of lack of direction working from home, sometimes as leaders, we may also be at fault for not being able to guide our team over a digital mean in that sense, especially people who are dealing with 300, 400 employees in that sense. So I think self-awareness is important. And I think as leaders, we need to have that self-awareness to identify and address the staff concern in that sense. And for employees to be able to have a safe space and environment to speak up. So maybe organizations really have to create this safe space and environment for to speak up and for management to be able to address their concerns in that sense. Because you're absolutely correct, there's already enough stress working from home, toddlers screaming while you're trying to answer a meeting question and things like that. Just so many things going on, and I think as leaders, we just need to pay attention on this. Thanks.
And from the Q&A box as well, I noticed that a lot of the participants are saying that because we work from home, there's that no separation, like Jonathan said, right? No separation between like work and then home. You're just there, you're at home working at your desk. So how do you create that space for our audience today? How do you advise them to create space, like beyond fitness webinars and online meditation? What can they do? What else can they do? Maybe I'll open this to the floor.
Maybe I could just quickly jump in if you don't mind.
Sure.
We get this a lot from employees as well as employers actually. So I think there are a couple of things that could be done, and I'll separate it into almost two buckets, right? I think one is what we can control within our own means, and then another one is what employers can also do to help reinforce that culture from up top. So I think as an individual, whether you're an employer or you're a leader, I think there are physical boundaries that could be set when it comes to work from home. So for example, the physical boundaries are kind of like a mental trigger that actually helps us to code switch between this is my work mode, this is now I'm teaching my kids for their class, and then this is when I'm actually preparing, meals for the family. And so I think in terms of setting those physical boundaries, do you have a setup or proper workspace delineated? I do understand that not everyone has that privilege. Some might be in smaller and more confined spaces, shared spaces, but wherever we can, if we can find even just that corner of a table and we designate that as that is my work space. Physically, I wake up, I change, do my routine, and then once I enter this zone, this is my work zone. For example, just personally sharing, I run a team that's across all Southeast Asia now, and we're distributed. Likewise, there's sometimes no difference to me when the workday starts and ends. But I have very strict boundaries, right? I never work on my bed, for example. I never work on the sofa. Those are places where I relax. And so those are the mental triggers that we can help set up because that also actually helps us unconsciously ramp up our stress or, ramp down our stress. So that's something that we can do within our own control of our physical space. I think one of the questions here very, accurately also pointed out, right, that there is competing priorities. On the one hand, yes, mental health is something we all talk about, and stress is something everyone's talking about. But how can we do it when we're constantly working, we're constantly getting pings on WhatsApp, on emails, and there's no clear delineation? I think this is where the up top kind of approach will probably be very important. Some best practices we've seen some companies do, which we find to be very powerful. Small things but big impact, right? So for example, at the end of the signature, some companies actually put just a phrase that says, I'm emailing you right now because it's convenient for me to do so, but you are not obligated to respond today or right now or immediately. This gives them the signal that, okay, I might be emailing you at 11:30, PM because it's convenient for me. I've just put my kids to bed, but it doesn't mean that you at 11:31 need to respond immediately. Very small gesture, but very powerful message that it sends. So I'll just stop here. I'd love to hear all the other best practices as well, at Allianz and also M. Yeah.
That's such a great idea, like to release the expectation to reply immediately, right? I think because everyone needs to reply this moment now, right now.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the time, and we're really we have run over time, and I would like to invite any last thoughts on mental health with organization, and I open the floor to the panel just to put in your last words before Joanne wraps it up. Maybe Darshini, maybe you can tell us like how do you manage, how does AIA come from the angle of how do you help your employees kind of separate that work-life balance? How do you just put it in there?
Yeah, so we have been running several interactive webinars on this topic, and it's very well received by our people. In addition to that, the comment that one of the participants posed, it's a very real problem. About performance and KPIs during this time. Employees are looking for managers to show more empathy. Managers as well are under a lot of stress. I mean, they are going through, the same challenges, but at the same time, they are expected to lead a team of people and for that team to deliver. So what we in fact did was at the start of this year, we actually put all our people managers, so anyone who has people manager responsibilities, we actually worked with Thoughtful to put them through a program. It's kind of like a training program about supporting your team's mental health during this time. Because we also know that, it's easy for us to say, show more empathy towards your people. But for a lot of people, it's like, they probably don't like sit down and consciously think about this. So, some amount of, maybe awareness and education is needed as well. So that's what we did. And it took us 6 months, but, we got some really good outcomes out of that. So that helped, I think, as well. Yeah.
I love the point that you said, like leaders themselves need this as well, not just employees. Leaders themselves, they need to be taken care of. Thank you to the panel for such an interesting conversation that we have. I wish we had more time. And Joan, would you like to close this off with what you're doing with the roundtable? I'll let you take this from here.
Sure. Firstly, thank you everybody for your questions and also comments. I think it was really wonderful and really insightful. I think one thing as well that we wanted to do to kind of close everything off, we realized that there is a lot of concerns and questions now about what can be done in terms of employee well-being. What are some of the best practices? And we, this was something that MII, as someone who has oversight into all the different companies across the industry brought up and highlighted. And I think we understand that every company has its own unique characteristics and structures. And so we thought it would be better to have an intimate setting. I think it's great to have, over 300 people here, but it's actually quite hard to do a deeper dive in understanding what those challenges are and actually doing, a quick fire Q&A and understanding what can be done in terms of an actionable way. So MII and us, we're actually partnering to organize this closed roundtable for all industry CHROs or HRs to do a more private and intimate needs analysis where we can actually, have a conversation about what some of those challenges are. What are those practices that can be employed or maybe trialed and explored, and also if there's an actionable example plan that needs to be done, I think that's something that can be that can be discussed as well. This has nothing to do with, you know, whether you sign up for Thoughtful or anything. MII is not paying us for this at all. It's just something that we realize, even from our perspective, and we have clients from different industries, not just insurers. It's a very big question right now. It's also a very new topic when it comes to integrating well-being infrastructure into companies. And so, you know, the more conversations, the more sharing of best practices there are, the better. So we invite you to come. The date will be announced by MII, Shalini and team. And yeah, come with all your problems and questions, and we'll see what we can do in that discussion. So thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the speakers, the panelists, Joan, Darshini, Jonathan, Winman, for joining us on this panel today. I think our participants would agree that we have addressed and unearthed a little bit more on mental health and how we will move forward as leaders to create a safe and healthy space, a positive environment for our employees. And we can all agree that the work here is not done, but the good thing is we have already started. So moving on to the last discussion today of day one. In this Insurance Leadership Forum, we would like to end day one with a trait. We're going to do a fireside chat on sustaining peak performance. This fireside chat is inspired by the struggles of a leader. We know being a leader is difficult because we're leading our team. We're the ones carrying more burden than others, right? Of having to constantly think on your feet. You're expected to be at the forefront, be the change. As a leader, we recognize that. And you're constantly playing the role of firefighter, putting out fires, ensuring a team is able to deliver and function and perform effectively for the organization. So learning to live with the virus is our new reality. It's here to stay. So with it comes learning how do we flourish in this hybrid work environment. In this session, we will try to expand your thinking, identify key behaviors that impact performance and mindset, and explore a holistic approach for you to lead yourself and your team. In this fireside chat, we have Ms. Kavita Satwalekar, leadership coach, wellness expert, mentor, and author. She leverages on her 14 years of vast corporate experience in executive coaching and organizational development with her deep love for helping others find success and harmony in everyday life. She empowers her clients to make sense of their inner worlds, thus enabling them to lead from within. We're also accompanied by award-winning master performance coach, Gail Gibson, who's also an author and speaker. She's known as the can-do coach, who thrives on enabling leaders to step up, shake it off, and shine. She helps leaders break through the frustration of stagnant or unfulfilled personal and professional growth. Moderating this panel is Malaysia Insurance Institute's CEO Shalini Pavithran, who leads the professional body and education institution for the Malaysian insurance industry. Enjoy this discussion and put your questions in the Q&A box. Shalini, off to you.
Thank you, Lillian. I know we, I think right smack during lunchtime, so we're going to just dive right into it. Kavita, Gail, are you all ready? As I think when we were preparing for this forum, we asked industry leaders as to what they wanted us to cover. And I think sustaining performance was a topic that came out really strongly, which is why it is here. And we wanted to make it conversational, but before that, I wanted to tap on the insights and expertise of both Gail and Kavita. You know, they work with so many leaders around the globe. They have been in various corporate roles as well. So I just want to tap into it. So we're going to spend a little bit of time for them going through some insights, and then we will come back and have a conversation as to the questions that we have received and questions that you can post in your Q&A. Kavita, Gail, are you ready?
We are indeed. Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Lillian and Shalini, and welcome to our talk, followed by our fireside chat with Shalini around sustaining peak performance as a leader beyond any crisis. So through today's session, we hope to expand your thinking so you can flourish in that hybrid work environment that everyone's talking about today. We will also touch upon some key behaviors that impact an employee's performance and mindset, and will play a huge role in moving forward in enabling successful remote leadership, which is our new reality today. And finally, we will help you blend this new thinking with your current work environment so you can get a chance to personalize your success in leading your teams through this pandemic and beyond. My name, as Shalini and Lillian mentioned, is Kavita Satwalekar, and I am a leadership coach, mentor, wellness expert, and author. I come from a background in psychology and organizational development with vast corporate experience as an internal executive coach, leading teams and managing all aspects of human behavior in the workplace. I branched out and started my company, Inner Sense Consulting, back in 2014. And I am extremely passionate about seeing leaders excel because I have personally experienced being led and coached by a phenomenal leader. And I know exactly how empowering an experience that can be. I was born in Mumbai in India and have lived in the US, in Vietnam, and in Singapore before moving to Malaysia last July. I'm currently based in Kuala Lumpur. Gail, over to you.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everybody. It's been really interesting listening to the previous panel as well, and I'm sure Kavita and I have taken away a lot of insights from that as well. So I am Gail Gibson, known as the Can Do Coach. I am a Master Performance Coach. Now, my background is having been in corporate. I worked in the UK and was in corporate organisations for 10 years, and I was a senior leader in that time. So I've come from the background, as Kavita said as well, we have been leaders ourselves, and then I took a leap of faith in 2005 and set up my first business, and then this morphed into and became my coaching consultancy, Geisha Consultancy Limited, from 2013. So I've been in business now for 16 years and have been working globally with business leaders and corporate leaders across the globe, namely in the US, the UK, and now in Southeast Asia. So I was originally born in Australia on the sunny shores of Perth, Western Australia, and I have been travelling throughout my life, working and travelling the globe, and my husband and I spent almost 25 years living and working and running my two businesses in the UK, and we upped sticks and moved to beautiful Malaysia in 2018. So it's been a wonderful time to explore and to become part of the Asian culture as well, and to work with leaders here as well. I am a three times published author, just have released my third book this year, and Kavita and I co-wrote a book on leadership during the pandemic as well. And I host a weekly podcast called The Can Do Way, which is all about sharing stories of growth, resilience and success from incredible guests of mine across the planet. So let's start to expand your thinking and bringing some thoughts, perhaps thinking about some of the insight that you've heard from the other chats already, and bringing it all to this close at the end of today's performance. So as Lillian said at the start when she introduced us, it is about living with COVID, and we acknowledge that, and it's about the reality that COVID will be here for some time. It is really important to think about whatever it is that you're doing as a leader or as an employee, that it's about acknowledging it. It's about saying, you know, it's real. It's about naming it and saying, I accept that I need to live through this time, and I perhaps have to manage my mindset and perhaps change some of my beliefs and behaviors to be able to move forward. And that, in essence, is what living with COVID is all about.
Lovely. So everyone right now is focusing on the what and the where of what jobs in this current hybrid environment will look like. But Gail and I today would like to focus on the why and the how of flourishing in this hybrid environment. So needless to say, COVID has changed the way we work and we live. We have heard about this numerous times. We have all experienced this, and it's our reality. So what you need to pay attention to is that most of what you did in the past as a leader has, because of this pandemic, now become redundant. So over the past 18 months, you have had to come to terms with your reality. You have had to help your family adapt and help your teams adapt, all while thinking on your feet and constantly putting out fires at work. This has been your reality pretty much for the past, since January last year for most companies here in Malaysia. And this is something you really need to, take the time to sit and think about, because it's been nonstop. I think the prolonged pandemic is what has really pushed us all over the edge. It's not so much just the pandemic. So, what I'm trying to get at right now is that it's about time to rethink the purpose of your team. Think about every employee on your team. They're different people than they were a year and a half ago, and you need to put time into realizing who they've become through the past year. Once you've had that chance then to rethink the purpose of your team, you also need to realign yourself and everyone on your team, including your stakeholders, right? This is not only about you and your team, but it's everyone you work with on a day-to-day basis. And think about how to engage with and within your teams. So how can you go about doing this? Once you've gone through the process of rethinking and realigning your team's purpose, you then need to implement these new ways within your team. You need to talk to your team members. You need to identify new boundaries around their work and around their lives. A lot of the panelists before us spoke about how there is this blur with work-life balance, and work just seems to go on, and life seems to happen in between work. Well, it's all about, re-looking at those boundaries and re-establishing them. You need to also start including your team members in decision-making around things like setting deadlines while considering their new reality. You need to have deep conversations that enable each team member to feel valued and respected. You need to think about how you're going to continue to build team spirit while working remotely. There's all of these different concepts that I'm just kind of putting out there right now, and Gail and I will go into them in a lot more detail shortly. But the idea is to start thinking about, and when I say, these are things you need to start thinking about, it's all about figuring out how you're going to intentionally become a leader moving forward, one whose sole purpose is to help their team flourish. And through that, think about how you can create a safe space so that all of your team members start then participating in brainstorming ideas for projects. And finally, think about how to take that safe space and turn it into a brave space so that those team members can approach you and other team members without that fear of being judged. So we'll go into this in a lot more detail in a bit.
Thank you. Thank you. And leading on from the flourishing and being able to thrive in this new hybrid environment that we're going into is about blending together the thinking that we're talking about. And Kavita and I know that the people that we have worked with, the clients that we've been working with, there's elements to everything. And when we put them separately, there's always steps to take in an approach or a new way of doing something. And then it's how do we bring that all together? So I just want to share with you 3 steps for you to perhaps, again, expand your thinking about how you're going to make this happen as a leader and within your team as well. And the first part about it is about getting curious. Now, in this time where you're going to be thinking and perhaps rethinking, is allowing yourself and the people in your team to get curious. So to think, how are we going to do this together? How are we going to collaborate on working out a way forward? Instead of it being a top-down or led from the top, It's about leading from within as well and saying, how can we work together? I want to listen to your viewpoint. And Kavita tapped into it as well. When you have those conversations, you allow people to feel more valued and part of something that's going to take you forward to a really positive and high-performing future. So get curious. And with that curiosity is perhaps create some, or allow the team to come up with and create some think tank projects or some really niche projects that can start that ball rolling within your team. And then these can radiate outwards within the organization as well, because people will start taking notice and thinking, wow, they're really having some curious conversations. This great thing's happening. They're feeling happier about what they're doing and it's making progress happen. It is about to make things to set up the platform to get curious, we need to have those conversations and we need to have deeper conversations, and we really need to listen deeply and more empathetically about what is actually taking place. So we need to ask more curious questions. We need to prompt more times where we not only talk about work, but we talk about and tap into, as the panel talked in the previous hour, was about the well-being. So checking in with people. So when we inspire these curious conversations, people feel valued and cared for as well. So they're more likely to be more engaged and they're more likely to want to participate and collaborate with you as well. And the third part of it, the third stage, is about how do you close that loop? How do you set some realistic expectations? How do you implement and allow those boundaries to be created for yourself, but also for those in your team, and make it a very transitional, a very intentional, and a very adaptive and flexible way of working moving forward, so that you and your team can thrive, not just now, but through any crisis going forward.
So in order to do that, Gail and I have identified 7 C behaviors that impact an employee's performance and their mindset. We'll both walk you through these behaviors over the next few minutes. So when we talk about clarity, it has a twofold meaning here. The first part of it refers to clarity in understanding the purpose of the team. And the second part of it refers to the clarity in understanding your place within the team, right? So that basically refers to providing that sense of belonging within the team, which further helps people, with their, I guess, commitment to the purpose of the team and with their commitment to the company moving forward. When we talk about confidence, when team members feel empowered, they automatically start contributing and look to turn that safe space that a leader creates within a team into that brave space. And all of a sudden, when that happens, is when you have a team of employees who are very confident, and more than anything, they're confident enough to voice their ideas and then go ahead and participate in the success of their teams.
So leading on from clarity and confidence, we move into what I just mentioned before around those courageous conversations. But it gets me thinking, how do you inspire those? How do you ignite that kind of conversation with the people in your team? And what do we mean by courageous? Now, I liken that to the coaching techniques that I use as well, and Kavita, I'm sure, shares these, where it's about bringing to the awareness of what's actually going on. So by being courageous is about asking, about probing and asking those deeper questions. But it's not just about finding out about well-being, it's finding out about, well, what are your suggestions? What would you like to do going forward? It's really, really digging deeper and deeper and deeper to unearth the strengths of the team that you have. And perhaps it's also listening to where the challenges that are being faced by people, how can you ignite even further those conversations to bring those challenges out into the open and talk about them as a team or talk about them on an individual basis as well. So that some people in this transition time of building confidence in themselves and building more confidence as being part of a group is saying to people, I'm hearing you. I'm listening to what you're saying, and how can I help you to become more confident and have more of a voice when it comes to working with others. So I think for leaders is not to be afraid to get people to name what it is that's challenging them, to bring that out and make it an awareness, and also to work out ways that you can inspire those conversations with others, and you can ignite that sense of purpose, that sense of excitement, and also get some great conversations going, so that conversations can lead to people being more engaged, being happier in their work, and being more loyal to you and the organisation as well. And this leads brilliantly to building this whole sense of cooperation and collaboration. Kavita and I talk a lot around the collaboration and moving from silos to more about collaborative working in our book, The C19 Leader. And it's all about saying to your people, I don't want to just lead you. I have a vision and I'm here to help you get to where we all want to get to, but I want you to go on this journey with me. So it's about cooperation, it's about listening, it's about supporting, it's about letting people take some of that lead as well. So you can let go of some of the things that perhaps are challenging you, and your leadership, and things that you want to turn around and perhaps do differently and lead differently. So when you get the buy-in through those courageous conversations, when you allow your teams to cooperate with you and to want to collaborate with you as well, it's incredible. And we've seen it, haven't we, Kavita, where the conversation just spires off into so many different things, and there's this sense of energy and momentum and this curiosity that just keeps abounding further and further. It creates this really strong ripple effect.
Absolutely.
And on to commitment as well. My final C, and then I'll hand over to Kavita, is, as I said, you get the loyalty, you get the buy-in, and you get the support. And when you have all of those things in place, it's just incredible what can happen.
Lovely. Thanks for that, Gail. And two other very important C behaviors to mention at this point is consistency and check-in. So when we talk about consistency, we need to remember that a routine enables consistency, and that further enables predictability, which eventually helps an employee's performance. Now, when we talk about a routine and we talk about consistency, especially through this pandemic, it was very important to pay attention to, I mean, everyone has been talking about mental health, and having a routine in your life is something that really helps with mental health as well. So it has a slightly twofold effect over here. It's about being consistent, it's about being predictable, and it's about keeping on doing something till you achieve what it is that end goal is. And the other really important behavior to talk about over here is accountability. This is self-accountability as well as accountability to team members and accountability to the leader. So, you know, Gail and I both work with the concept of accountability buddies. A lot of time when we're running programs, in between the programs, we set up accountability buddies who are participants in the program who don't really know each other, but get to know each other between sessions so that, you know, they help each other with what it is that they say they're going to do. So similarly, employees on your team can be buddied up either on smaller projects, you know, or just generally through different teams. So it's a place for them to keep each other on track, to keep each other accountable, and to generally complete what it is that they said they would be completing. And this, again, needs to be done on that regular basis so that progress is made way before actual deadlines are due. Sorry, my computer is stuck over here. Perfect. Lovely. Okay, so we'll now go ahead and spend a few minutes talking about a holistic approach that Gail and I recommend as something that's very important for sustained peak performance. I thought of a really different way for you to look at your role as a leader, right? You are the bond between your team members. You are the one person that ties your team together, and you are that common thread for your team. So knowing that, what do you think you could potentially do differently to help your team move ahead successfully? Now, this is not something that I want you to answer on the call here, but it's definitely something I want you to think about, right? You as the leader are the bond for your team. And yes, when we were writing this, we did think of James Bond, but that's a little bit on the side. But the idea is that, as a leader, it's something more for you to think about. Your success of your team actually and truly depends on you, right? So is there something then that you could add to your daily or weekly routine that would help you consciously tie your team together, right? And these are just things for you to think about. Gail and I will stick around during the fireside chat so that, if you have any questions around that, we can help you answer that as well.
So on to the growth mindset, which, as Kavita knows, is something that is so close to my heart, and it forms the entire basis of my coaching approach, which is the can-do approach. And I will always encourage the growth mindset development in the work, through the work that I do, and in all of the leaders that I work with as well. And it is so vital that you, as a leader, embody a growth mindset in how you lead yourself, how you lead others, and how the organization in itself leads moving forward. And the secret to that is because it is the growth mindset that is about sustainability. It is about bringing out the best in people. It's about playing to strengths, and it's about being able to manage challenges, setbacks, and see feedback as a lesson for growth. And there's so many more. There's 5 key components to it that is about skills development, about effort, about challenge, about setbacks, and about feedback. So it's embracing all of these parts of a growth mindset. But I think the most important thing to think about, and you might be, as you're listening to my description about the growth mindset, be thinking yourself, am I a leader with a fixed or a growth mindset? So somebody with a growth mindset is somebody who has the attitude and belief that talents, abilities, and success comes from effort, facing challenges, and that you can develop your emotional intelligence, you can develop your intelligence, and it's based on a development principle. What it means as well then is that you respond positively to feedback, and you view learning as a growth point in your leadership role in life. And also that I think, and I've said this to so many people over many, many years, that it's these lessons that we learn when we fail, when we make mistakes, and we pick ourselves up again. And they are the most important lessons that we can ever learn. And so leaders who lead with a growth mindset are the ones that do acknowledge that. And if they do make a mistake, they're not quick to blame their team, or they're not going to micromanage their team to say, this is where it's all gone wrong and I'm going to point the finger of blame. They will take a step back and say, let's have a look at what went wrong. How can we fix this? What can we do differently going forward? So they learn from the mistakes. And also when it comes from the feedback as well, that they don't push it off into the corner and perhaps get the imposter syndrome coming in, but they open themselves up to say, what can I learn to do a bit differently next time? But in my mind, the idea of a growth mindset and embodying a growth mindset as a leader is that it's the best platform from which we can grow and succeed in life and our careers.
Lovely. When we talk about lead by example, and the previous panel referred to it as well, if you want your team to be successful, you really need to model that behavior yourself as a leader. So you need to model what peak performance looks like so that your team members can mirror that behavior. You also need to model personal accountability, responsibility, a good work ethic, and then take the time to point that out to each team member so that they know what exactly it is that they need to embody in order to be successful in their work, right? You also need to pay attention to if you're not calm as a leader, and you may have heard, the term deliberate calm over the past year or so. It's about being in a state where you're forcing yourself to, at least to keep a calm, to stay calm at the surface, so that you can truly be presentable and be helpful to the people around you. So if you're thinking about that deliberate calm, if you aren't calm when you go into a meeting, you are going to be that, potentially startled deer who starts off, a little bit of a rampage when a lion comes by, right? So these are things just to pay attention to. You've got to take on that responsibility. You've got to really embody what it is that you want your team to experience and to feel and to share by doing that yourself. So you truly do need to lead by example moving forward.
Thank you, Kavita. So bringing it all together, the leader as a bond, embodying the growth mindset and leading by example is all part of the cycle of sustainability. And by that, what I mean is this is a positive wheel of success, and it's something that continues to build momentum. When you think about the flip side of a cycle or a wheel, you think about perhaps the hamster wheel, and we might think, oh, we get stuck on that wheel and we do the same thing and we keep going around and around and around and around. But this positive cycle of sustainability that I'm talking about here, that we've illustrated to you, is thinking about how do you build momentum within your team? How do you build in the accountability? How do you ignite the desire in your team to want to develop a strong growth mindset so that they can build resilience, they can face challenges, they can learn from things? How will you lead by example, and how will you keep strengthening that bond that you have, A, with yourself, and B, with your team, and C, within your organization? But really, it's all about building this cycle of sustainability. And I liken it to 3 key points that you can think about as you take away the information that we've shared. Is part of your cycle of sustainability is the first point is about reviewing. So reviewing these 3 previous examples we've shared here. What does it look like? Am I standing out, and am I leading with myself as a bond? Am I leading with a growth mindset? Am I leading by example? And then together with your team, you can think about reframing it. So what is it going to make? What do we need to do as a team to make this cycle of sustainability, this positive wheel of success, keep happening? And then we can redefine what that looks like, how we can implement it, how we can continue to ignite it, how we can keep building that momentum. And then the 4th point of it, sorry, there's 4 steps, not 3. The 4th point of it is go on repeat, but not get stuck in the repeat cycle so that it becomes monotonous. Always be thinking, how can we keep growing? How can we keep adapting? How can we keep being flexible to meet the needs so that we can all achieve peak personal performance in our growth mindset, in ourselves, our own leadership, in the leadership that we are delivering, and as an organization going forward.
Lovely. Thanks for that, Gail, and thanks for just pulling it all together so very nicely. This is a copy of our book, which is available within the eShop. So hence the image on here. But with this slide, we would like to transition over to the fireside chat, and would love to invite Zaylani to join us there.
Thank you so much, Gail, Kavita. I know we covered, and it was important to get through that concepts, because if we just suddenly started our conversation, I think it'll be a bit difficult to, grasp what is it, So that's why, it was good to set that context and put that in place. But we have a question before. I have a few questions, but I think it's more important to get to the audience question first. How do we manage people who need to be reminded of their work? And keeping them to get them to be progressive? Some need constant reminders to get them to follow up on their work, so it can be very draining as a leader. So how do you deal with it?
Gail, I can
Okay, you take it. We're both going to jump in. It's okay.
Yeah. The advantage of having two coaches on the call. So, what's really important is when you constantly have to remind someone to do their job, you know that there's a lack of commitment there. And through some of those deeper conversations that Gail was alluding to earlier in our talk, it's important to try and find out their why, find out why deadlines are being missed, find out what their new reality is. If the person was not able to commit to that deadline or to tasks that are expected of them, right in the beginning, then it's difficult for them to follow through. So get to know your people again. Shalini and I were chatting about this even before the call, and you have to pretty much recontract with all your employees, because who they were 18 months ago is not who they are today. Someone who might have been a high performer earlier could have been a high performer for reasons that you took for granted or that they took for granted, which was that, they're extroverted and they gain energy from working in the workplace, versus at home, there's a lot of disruptions, there's a lot of distractions, and they're not really having those energizing conversations with colleagues. And maybe that's part of the reason why this is not happening. So
I think, Kavita, to jump in for the audience benefit, my question to Kavita was, how do we help people to transition, right? Because we were working from home, then we came back into the office for a while, then we went back home, and now we need to start preparing for that eventuality. So I was talking to Kavita, how do we transition that smoothly as leaders and ensure, again, going back to the topic, how do we keep that performance sustained, right? So that's where Kavita is coming from. That was the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, and apologies, I should have mentioned that, but it just tied in so well into the question that was asked here on the panel as well, because I do feel it's all part about getting to relearn who your employees are and reset, expectations, reset boundaries, reset, even letting them know that, KPIs are still going to be measured. We just have to look at them slightly differently if you're doing it from a different environment. Gail, is there anything you would add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what you said, which is brilliant, is even while we're in this rethinking phase and this repurposing phase and getting to know the staff again, is thinking about how can you bring in that accountability partnership as well, so that if somebody is struggling and as Kavita said, they're not performing and you're having to constantly remind, buddy them up with somebody who can bring out some of those strengths with them. So someone who's more of a high performer in the group, and then they can help play to their strengths and bring out and say, what is it? So it doesn't have to be a manager and employee conversation. You're working with your colleagues, so you're on a different level and you're having different conversations, just to say, I'm here to help you, I'm here to support you, I'll challenge you, and together they can grow as well.
So
I just wanted to share
space, right? Gail, that's the safe space, right?
It is a safe space. It's but turning that safe space into a brave space, so that you feel that you can get your voice heard. And as you're developing your confidence, of again, some of the points we tapped into is if your colleague hears you and you feel more confident saying it to your colleague, then you're going to start building that strength in yourself. And when you stand up to work within the group, you're going to have more confidence there as well. So I just wanted to share with all the listeners as well is a book that Kavita and I have both read, which is called Think Again. And it's by an incredible organizational psychologist called Adam Grant, and he's based in the US. And if you want to get those curious conversations and those courageous conversations started, I recommend it to all leaders to just get you into the mode of be as curious as you can for longer, rethink everything that's said to you and rethink it again, and allow that to be radiated into your team, so that this will inspire and bring some of those magic conversations to life.
Okay, I just found the link. I will put it in the chat for everybody so that they don't miss that. Okay, Think Again by Adam Grant, right?
That's
okay.
Correct.
I think there's a question, a follow-up question on a productivity tool. Is there any tips or tools that can be used to keep productivity in check?
Okay, I'll be happy to share my power hour if that's all right with you, Kavita.
Go
So
for
the
it.
power hour is a tool not created by me, but one that I have adapted and use myself, and it's a proven tool time and time again. So the idea of the power hour is, again, it's part of perhaps a new way of thinking as a team and collaborating on teamwork so that everybody gets a chance to get their best work done. But the premise of it starts with, do you know within your team when each person in that team is at their productive best? So with this remote working situation that we are continuing to be in, and even with the advent of hybrid working, is getting people to think, when am I at my best? So that when am I producing my best work? And during that time that I am producing my best work, how can I really focus on my productive best work for a very focused period of time? So the power hour works like this. You set aside the hour, but what you do is you need to communicate that to those around you. So if you're working from home, it's about communicating that with those around you, perhaps your family, switching your phone off, turning your phone over. Get yourself a little timer as well, and it could be a timer on your phone, but I actually like to not use my phone because then you get distractions and you can see other notifications come in. So what you then do is spend the first 5 minutes in planning. So what is it that you want to achieve in the next hour? Then you spend 40 minutes of focused work, working only on that task. So you are not having any distractions. You've switched your phone off. You've said to people, I am having a power hour. Please respect my time. And you focus on that 40 minutes and get that work done. When you get to the end of that time, you set your timer for 5 minutes and you get up and you walk away from your desk. So what that's in doing as well is encouraging you to sit less and move more. So you get up, walk away, go and make yourself a drink, go downstairs, do whatever it is that you want to do in your house, stretch, sing a song, do whatever it is, but get away from your desk. Right? Yep. Non-work related. So don't pick up your phone. Don't feel inclined to pick up your phone and look at a message. Walk away because you've been so focused. Once you've had that 5 minutes, let your timer go off, come back to your desk and sit down and look through and review the work that you've just completed in that 40 minutes of intent work. And what I've found is that when I use that technique throughout a day, when I have got specific things I want to work on in those power hours, I actually achieve more. And so at the end of the day, it's not about ticking off things off your to-do list, but it's actually saying, I have worked on purpose today and I have met my purpose and my intent for the day. And it builds this routine, this positive routine in your mind to say, when I focus on the one thing and I eliminate all of the distractions, I achieve more. And so it's something that you can run as a team. You can check in with each other. You can build it into your accountability, all of those kinds of things. And another one that people can look at, because that's my version of the power hour, is the Pomodoro effect, which is the same type of thing. And it's, you set your timer for 25 minutes, you do 25 minutes of intense work, and then you have 5 minutes off. You do another 25 and 5, 25 and 5. And it actually says that in a 40-hour week, you can cut your work time down to 23.3 hours of focused, intentional work. So hopefully
the Pomodoro way?
Right. Yes, cuts your week down to 23.3 hours.
So the 25 or 40 minutes, that depends? It depends on what?
Depends on what you want to do. And if you are somebody who works more effectively in a half-hour space of time as against a longer time. But if you really, so if I'm writing, I need the 40 minutes because I just get 40 minutes worth of really high value commitment down on paper or on the computer, and then I move away and then I come back and look at it. Okay. But 25 minutes might work better for somebody else. So hopefully those tips can help you.
I just want to take one question about, because we saw the issue of managing upwards coming up really strongly, right? I think all through the day we saw that, and even as in our conversations as we're preparing for the forum. Now, if I frame this as a question, right, what can I do? Okay, so I'm a manager. What can I do when my leader does not understand the need to support me or my team? Now, what are the tips and tricks that you would suggest? So how to manage upwards very tactfully, you know. I remember one of my mentors told me, if you want to manage upwards, you need to be financially independent. I don't think that is true. I don't believe that is true, but I want to hear what you think. Yes.
Oh, you took my thunder away, Shalini. I was going to say bribe them, pay them some. No, I'm only kidding. I'm only joking.
Okay.
I think one of the things that is really important when it comes to upward management is that it's not a dramatic impact that you're trying to create, that you're trying to build a rapport upwardly with your manager, your leader. So I think it starts with conversations, and it starts with having more courageous conversations. And one of the things that I think more than anything is when you start to have these conversations with your leader and you start to listen more deeply and you start to get more curious, perhaps, it gives you the chance to actually start understanding what makes your leader tick. What is it that makes them shine? So how can you perhaps ask questions that are going to make your leader shine? So play to their strengths, listen for what it is, listen for the things that they like. So in our women's mastermind group, a couple of months ago, we discussed, didn't we, Kavita, the topic of upward management. And it was like, if your leader is somebody who likes to have reports sent to them in a certain way, don't change the format of how you're going to send it to them, because it's just going to send them off perhaps in a tangent and go, well, that is not who I am, and that's not how I like to see figures presented to me. So go away. And that can lead to the animosity, the blame, the finger pointing, and then the micromanaging can come in as well, because you're not actually listening and taking notice of how they appreciate reports coming to them, as one example. So I think one of the key things to get that conversation started is how can you engage in conversations that will meet the strengths of your leader. Play to those, keep building the rapport and keep building a really close and personal relationship. And it's not about the fact that you're trying to win the approval of or likened to the term of brown nosing somebody, where you might just go, I'm going to become the favorite of my leader and I'm going to become the go-to. That it's not about that. It's about listening. It's about being empathetic, and it's about being aware of how you can meet their strengths, and then they can start to see yours as well. Anything to add there, Kavita?
Actually, that last sentence that you kind of pushed in there was something that I wanted to highlight as well, because yes, it's about you figuring out how to make your leader shine, but then it's also teaching your leader about what your strengths are and helping them lean in on you. When, for example, they need something that's not as numbers focused, right? They know exactly who on the team to go to if that is a strength of yours. So it's also about showcasing your strengths, and it's also about giving them, that knowledge and giving them that information up front that, I'm your go-to if you need this done. These are my strengths. And then letting the leaders know that they have to actually do that with all the other team members too, so that they can honestly surround themselves with people who complement their strengths versus those who are just, supplementing the same strengths.
Okay. All right. Just to wrap up very quickly, if you could briefly, give examples of how you have helped leaders. I know it's difficult enough managing people, when you're face to face. Now, just imagine trying to manage a team that's partly in the office and partly at home, and they've got their own set of challenges as well. So how have you, any examples that you can very briefly, very quickly quote? Yes.
It's all about that whole recontracting that I spoke about earlier as well, right? You've got to know your employees. You've got to know what their reality is today. And based off of that, you've got to even set realistic expectations. If you know someone is helping their children with homeschooling and with multiple other things at home, you don't have a meeting that is, where this particular person needs to present at, say, 10 o'clock in the morning when there's a class on at the exact same time. So it's about meeting them somewhere halfway through and ensuring, that you're paying as much attention to their lives as you are to their work. And this extra attention actually motivates and empowers the employees. Chances are they may even get someone else to take care of their child at that time, because they're feeling that connection with their boss. They're feeling their connection with the leader. And you know, if you asked me to look back at my corporate life, what actually tied me to the companies I was working with was my leader. Because the job would happen everywhere, but it was that leader and that empathy, it was that concern, it was that one-on-one relationship I had with my leader that actually kept me, you know, in my job. I also moved with my leader, right? So there's a lot of that happens too, because once you build a relationship, once you work really well with someone, you're happy to switch teams. This happened to be in the same company, but you know, I would have happily moved with him to different companies too, because you know you have a successful relationship, you know, at the workplace. If everything else stays constant, why not leverage it?
Okay.
So this whole thing of upward management plays into a lot of, you know, this success with even remote working. It's about asking them not only how are you doing, but how are you doing really?
There's a follow-up question, right, Gil, before I get to you. There's a follow-up question about, you know, we talked about output management, right? So they say that, you know, when new leadership joins a company, they bring their own cultural references. Now, friction naturally will happen, you know. So how positive is that friction, and when do we know that the friction is toxic for the workplace? A coffee chat or a power wire upward leader management only works when the leaders operate to motivate individuals, as opposed to those who say, look, I'm just going to let you know, let things sort themselves out. Now, how does that work? So then in that kind of an environment, how do you manage that?
Sorry, is that, did you direct that to Gail?
Either one of us, yeah. Do you want to start?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question, and it is reality for most of us. And the short answer would be, you know, send them to Gail and myself, and we will tell them that is not the way to do things. But the long answer to that is figure out what it is that makes them tick. You know, when a leader comes into an organization, most often they're not going to come in and want to change things around. They're going to kind of sit back, observe what's going on, and, you know, adapt their culture to what's really happening. Unless, of course, someone has come in with the purpose of changing the way things are, because they haven't been working in the past. So either which way, find out what that leader's why is, you know, and then help them understand why things have been happening in a certain way in the company itself, if you are in that position to explain things to them. But it's all about getting to know that leader as a person. You know, they're not just a role. There's something that's driving them. There's something that's, you know, driving either a positive or a negative behavior that you're experiencing. So make sure you have those conversations, a lot of those courageous conversations that Gail was referring to earlier in our brief presentation as well, and start there, and you know, then see how you can move forward together, because that is the aim. So identify what the leader's why is, look at them as a person, talk about the end goal together, and then come up with a plan on what the best way is to get there.
Okay. All right. Anything else to add, Gil? If not, we're going to wrap up, but there is a question in the Q&A. If you could just help me to type a reply to that person, I think that will be good, because we do need to wrap up. Gil, anything else?
I just wanted to say, leading on from what Kavita said, when you work out the why of the leader, it's then that leader in turn opens up the opportunity for their team to hear what their why is as well. So it's about radiating this and role model and leading as an example, as we've talked about before. And so when we then get onto the same page, and then we can move from a foundation point and start to move outward as well, and have more and more of those conversations, and build that and move that transition and that change of a new person coming in, new leadership. You get the buy-in from the people that you are now working with, and you understand each other at a deeper level as well. I think it's most important to be able to do that. So you can still bring some of the the ways that you operated previously in another organization that play to your strengths. You can introduce those new things in your new team as well. But I think it's really important to go back to, as Kavita said, what is the why behind it? What is the whole purpose overall? And how does that align with the purpose of the organization as well?
Okay, thank you very much, Gail. Thank you, Kavita. I think just to summarize, I think the panel, I know that you all mentioned looking at, expand your thinking, understanding the why. I think building that trust, I believe it's about trying to find that chemistry, right? Striking the right tone, building a safe space, safe and brave space. I believe that's the word that you use, a safe and brave space for your team, and to encourage the whole growth mindset. And I think, and in terms of how, again, managing upwards, I think that's a conversation that we always that keeps coming up, and it's about how do you get to know them from the human side of it, right? Not just as a role, as you mentioned. I think that is the important thing. And again, we have some questions. Okay, Ken says this is a good session, great session actually, very good. So we have some questions. If you have more questions, I think we will make sure that Kavita and Gail gets to it. But again, thank you so much. Kavita and Gail's book, the blurb, I think, Hazrina, if you could just put it up. It's called C19. Hazrina, if you could just put the book back up. I just want to again thank Kavita and Gail, and I just want to thank everybody for staying. We're really sorry that we seem to have overrun, I think, by about 20 over minutes, but we're going to wrap it up. Lillian, are you there? I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you again.
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, Gail, Kavita, Shalini. And that was an insightful chat. Like, I took away, I'm loving the power hour. That's what I'm going to be doing. And I love how you talked about the why, right? When we figure out our why and how we align that with the organization is one word. It comes down to one word, alignment. And let's wrap up for day one. That we are going towards that direction. On behalf of the organizing committee, I'd like to sincerely thank all of our guests. Thank you, our guests of honor. First of all, Mr. Adnan Zaylani bin Muhammad Zahid, and all our speakers, Mr. Samuel Kim, Mr. Jonathan, Ms. Wong Woon Man, Ms. Darshini M. Nathan, Ms. Joan Lau, Ms. Shalini Pavithran, Ms. Kavita, and Ms. Gail Gibson for today. And most of all, thank you to the audience, for contributing to such a fruitful and thought-provoking discussion. Thank you for your participation today. Thank you for playing full out. So in day one, we covered so much. We covered adaptive leadership. We covered let me pull that up. We covered adaptive leadership. We covered employee well-being. We also covered peak performance in this session. And we are bringing this discussion into day two tomorrow, addressing what would the future look like in the insurance industry, how leaders can lead through online branding. You can lead through online branding. We'll be talking about that. An exciting discussion on how to fill the employee's competency gap and learning and development. And of course, how you as a leader can lead transformation. And you won't want to miss any of this. So same place, same time tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. bright and early. I wish you a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you very, very much.